Hello, dear friends.
Greetings.
Greetings. We'd like to start with such an event that has taken place only recently. It's the release of the Universal Grain Program. This program is actually the result of social research of people who had heard the primordial knowledge conveyed by Igor Mikhailovich in the programs, those keys which had been given in the programs, and just got inspired with this idea, united, in order to find in various religions that universal grain which unites all people.
And the Universal Grain Program is valuable precisely for the fact that it has shown that the majority of people were talking about the universal grain which is inside of them, beginning with scientists and down to ordinary people, even to representatives of religion. People were talking about what they have inside.
Yes.
Religion is a collection of traditions and numerous rules, in fact. How things should be done, what is needed, it's for helping a seeker. This is good, wonderful. But the true grain, it is inside of everyone. It is impossible to write it down on paper. On paper, we write down only symbols and signs. We won't write about that truth which is actually within. It's impossible to describe it, but it is possible to feel it.
And it's been also very remarkable that people, totally regardless of their nationalities, of their, again, religious affiliation, or no affiliation at all, absolutely all of them feel that there is love which is beyond human love, that major love.
This video.
Love for God.
What makes this video so valuable? Because it has shown that after all, a majority of people, a prevailing majority, they do feel this. They do feel that there is God. Everyone calls him differently. The most interesting thing is that even a person who calls himself an atheist, he says, but I do feel, I know. And that says a lot. They feel that there is something. They don't know how to call him. Yet, is there any difference in how one calls him? Everyone calls him differently. But we speak of the same. That's what is valuable. It's valuable because people are uniting. It shows that it is possible. And that's what is needed. That's what is interesting.
And moreover, this video as it has clearly shown how big is the number of people in general who are already free, so to say, inside, because
they are not free. They feel that it's possible. But if we get to the root, then people are seeking this freedom. They're striving for it. However, consciousness, just like the system, it does everything so that the people wouldn't gain this freedom.
This video, it is also good because it inspires with examples.
It really inspires.
It really does.
That's true.
After watching it, there is a desire to just do something.
And you know, it has also shown the importance. Once in the programs, we've raised the topic that people are ashamed to speak about the soul. People are ashamed to speak about the God.
This is not customary.
It's not customary, but it's not customary for whom?
this has been imposed.
It's like in the previous program about Atlantis, right? Remember? There it was told about rhapsodes. These are, let's say, people who are paid to impose a certain opinion on public consciousness. Thus, these rhapsodes have imposed on the last generation that one shouldn't talk about the soul. You can talk about whoever you like, about any perversions, about murders, about death. This is customary, people like this. But who likes? Human consciousness does. And all this was imposed and continues to be imposed very actively. But it's not customary to talk about love, about God, about peace, about something good, about that which really comes from the soul. And let's look at the cinematography. What do we see? These blockbusters and everything else.
Emotions, simply pumping of some emotions.
Absolute emotion, absolute violence. Everywhere there is evil and some hero who himself
Defeats the evil through using the same methods.
using the same methods. And he himself is often that very evil. In fact, today there are many movies where a serial killer is fighting a certain evil. And it happens so that willingly or unwillingly, we sort of take the side of this killer and worry about him. There are indeed a lot of such movies. And what happens? We accept it.
That is, a person copies this pattern of behavior.
That is absolutely right. And so the videos about Atlantis and the universal grain, they precisely show and complement each other. They reveal that truth and show that people are, after all, alive, that people understand, feel and know a lot. If we take the Atlantis video, it shows the essence and the reason why, let's say, it went that way, and when humanity stopped being humanity. Well, I'll make it even more simple. A human being is dual, right? One part of the human, it is the angelic part. Another part, it is the animal part. This was told about long ago, and it is, let's say, a well-known fact. And so the question is just critical here. Who should dominate? Should the angel control the beast, or should the beast control the angel? On this depends the vector of development and the future of humanity itself. When the beast controls the angel, when the angel at this time, is like a plucked chicken squeezed into a corner, terrified of the wild dog that constantly bites it. And that's how people feel in reality. They are afraid to even think about God, and they treat God only as consumers and so on. Why? Because the beast dominates. And when the human angel, that personality who is a person in reality, is in the state of being plucked, torn, bitten by this mad dog, in such a depressed state in the corner, then what spirituality can we talk about? And what future of this humanity can we talk about? Well, if we put everything aside, we are outside of politics, outside of religion. It doesn't concern us as a movement, but as any citizen. We live in the society, we exist in it, and if we look at the world impartially, what shall we see? We will see constant conflicts, wars, economic wars, real wars. This is what is happening now, when young people are dying. Well,
Struggle and confrontation.
struggle and confrontation is anywhere and everywhere. Isn't that so? This is happening all over the world. Can we call this a civilized, developed society? And what will happen to this society? I think that any reasonable person himself understands that, after all, the end is clear. And the one who has inner eyes, the one who has inner hearing, he understands and knows everything himself. Whereas those who live under the dictation of those very rhapsodes, they don't need it. It's all the same. And so, if it would be different, when the angel is holding on a tight leash this rabid dog, which is the animal part of a human, it is insatiable, and is controlling it, and this rabid dog is tame and, let's say, is doing everything what's necessary, then humanity will also change. And you know what's the most remarkable? That universal grain video has shown that it is still possible. Despite all the efforts of those who are described in the Atlantis video, I will carefully go around this. It is possible. If people want to choose, if people want and choose, let's say, life instead of death, and love instead of suffering, well, it all depends on people, on their choice. If people want to live in peace, in happiness, in love, and to be truly free, then no one hampers them. They can join hands and make friends with everyone, and it will happen. But if people are satisfied with living in problems, under the dictation of consciousness, always in sorrows, in problems, in struggle, in confrontation, in fear, and to exist, not to live, in a very short period of time, it is their choice. And this is, let's say, the most wonderful thing that God has given us. God has given us the right of choice. People say human will and the like. Well, let's put it so. Human will is nothing but the right of choice. What he has chosen is what will happen. This also applies to the entire humanity, to an individual as well as to the whole society. What we have chosen is what we've got.
I'll also add about the fact that the universal grain video has shown Here you have said such very kind words. They echo inside with deep feelings and understanding that really a lot of good things are happening in the world today. And people are united by this inner idea of kindness, happiness, and love. And this is so inspiring that you realize that in fact people want peace, in fact people want happiness, and in fact they are already experiencing it, right? Those people who came into contact with the answers that you give, with the answers that really concern most people today, to admit honestly, after all, this knowledge that you give, everyone is interested in it today. Because when a person is left alone, when a person simply, well, doesn't know the answer to what worries him, really, all these barriers, and the topic of today's program, it is also not chosen by chance, that it's freedom. What does freedom mean?
This is a good question. And what does freedom mean?
Well, how differently a person who's under the influence of consciousness interprets the concept of freedom, and how exactly the personality...
And what does a person understand by the word freedom? And again, we return to whom? We return to the angel and to the beast within a person, because the understanding is completely different. On the one hand, people feel what freedom is. And again, we return to the universal grain video, which shows that people feel and they strive for this freedom. And they understand what freedom is. Freedom is God's love. It is spirit. It is life. Freedom is eternity. Freedom is freedom from the dictation of three-dimensionality, from matter. Freedom from dictatorship of the beast within you, first of all. That's what freedom is. And people, thank God, feel this. But there is another understanding of freedom, freedom which is dictated by the beast. For it, power is freedom. The more power it possesses, the higher degree of freedom it has. Well, the system thinks so. Not even the system. The beast inside us thinks so, meaning our animal part, yes, the material part, with its consciousness and everything else. And every person, as you say, when he is alone, when especially, let's say, a person faces some problems in life or just being in peace, he starts to reason. And who am I? Who is a human being, in fact? And when he thinks about himself, why he is here, then even an internal discord arises in him. And most often, if a person comes into contact with something spiritual within himself, with something bright, he starts to experience fear. And whose fear does he experience? Fear is coming exactly from consciousness. Here, who doesn't let the person to true freedom?
And why doesn't he see it?
Because this is also a part of the person himself. We have already talked about this, and more than once. After all, our consciousness is nothing but what stands in front of our personality. It is exactly consciousness that has contact with three-dimensionality. If there's no consciousness, we won't see three-dimensionality. We won't see each other. We won't be able to contact each other in the same way as here, meaning at a simple verbal level. We see each other, we see our volume, our location in space, but all this will disappear. All three-dimensionality will disappear. However, perception through feelings, precisely as a personality, it must be developed and nurtured. If we take a child who would be raised among animals, he will grow up and he will be an animal. His personality won't be developed. He won't even be able to develop his consciousness properly in the future. That is, he will never become a human if during the first period, the period of formation, he was developing as an animal. Why? Because it is exactly the pack of animals that will dictate its own way of life, and his consciousness will be formed on the common egregore of the pack itself. Well, unfortunately, this has already happened more than once, and this is confirmed. But what does this evidence? The fact that our consciousness requires constant development, but so does our personality. It also requires constant development, whereas consciousness says the opposite. It says, human personality, or that inside which comes from God, it must first of all know everything, simply know everything and about everything. It must be developed, it must be perfect, because God cannot be imperfect. A simple question. A person is created in the image and likeness, right?
Yes.
So he immediately should be what?
Be perfect.
Be born with a beard and sitting in a chair.
Yes.
Well, isn't that so? And everything should be happening at a snap. Even flies should fall. That's how it is shown in the Atlantis video when the god was bored. Well, isn't that so?
The whole set of magic items.
Of course. So it turns out that consciousness is nothing but a deceitful creature. It imposes one thing and hides another. But when a person is working, when he is observing it, and simply, let's say, driving this beast into corner, not the beast drives the angel, but the angel drives the beast, everything falls into place. And then the person gains freedom. Freedom from dictatorship of his own beast-like part. Yes, it means from its domination. But in order to learn it, one needs to spend much effort, time, and really has to work on it. Well, here I'd like to raise another point, that there are two ways. There is a spiritual path, let's say for lay people, as it is said in religion, right? And there is for those who steps on the path of service. These are different things after all, absolutely.
There are very many questions in this regard, how to distinguish, well, like how to serve.
Well, indeed, these are different things. Service requires discipline, dedication. In this case, a person clearly understands that he can do a lot for the spiritual world. And he, let's say, cares not about himself, not about his own stay here, but he cares about the greater, he cares about people. And it's natural that his care should come from his own spiritual self-development and should be, let's say, maximally useful for the spiritual world, of course, and for people as for spiritual beings, as for future angels, but not like, say, for members of an animal pack.
It turns out to be an interesting moment. Even if we return to the impulse of the people who participated in the Universal Grain project, it turns out that the small victory of each person over that beast within oneself, little overcoming, they just have lit up by the interest and have decided to study, by overcoming consciousness, which was talking and stopping and was saying that there was no need to do it, that it wasn't relevant.
That I won't be able to, that I will fail.
Yes, that it won't work,
Right.
that this is totally hopeless, having overcome consciousness within oneself when personality comes to the foreground.
One's fears.
Yes, meaning having overcome this, they generated such a wave. We've heard so many people who sincerely talk about love, who sincerely talk about God, and the most interesting thing is that after this project, a new wave emerged, and precisely so many people responded.
Because this is alive.
Continuation, yes.
Why? Because it resounds exactly with their inner state. It resounds with their inner angel in a person, with his or her angelic essence. And if we look what kind of people indeed reveal themselves, and how they were revealing themselves. After all, they were revealing themselves in the pure, from the soul. They talked about it. Why? Because it is a constituent of every person.
In the common to all mankind.
In the aspect common to all mankind, of course.
They didn't even understand how they work on themselves, and this very little victor of theirs within themselves, what kind of mechanism it launches on the global scale.
Certainly.
And the resonance.
Yes, a resonance.
This is also a part of service.
And the main thing is that this model has been overturned, that which was imposed by rhapsodes, that which was imposed by the system, some sort of awkwardness, whether to talk on these subjects or not.
Yes, a fear to talk about the soul.
Now one just wants to talk, one wants to continue, to respond to this very search and...
Right, because that which for a long time, let's say, has been oppressed and considered already forgotten, well, sort of vestige of the past, it proves to be predominating in people. And it turns out that it is very precious and dear to everyone across the world, to all people. And no matter how the system was trying, it has failed to kill this. And it is joyful that people are awakening, that they really feel, and they are aspiring. And the best and most wonderful thing is that they are not afraid to talk about this. This is freedom.
And they show example to other people who are sitting and are afraid.
Of course, certainly. There's a part of service too. But here's also the most important thing. The fact that people feel their duality. People understand that there is a spiritual component inside. In all languages, in all religions. This is very important. This is what unites. This is exactly that inner love, inner striving for God. This is what's been called Allatra since ancient times. And the amazing thing is that there are scientists who confirm Allatra, its meaning and the like. See how simple everything is? Everything falls into its place. It turns out that the past isn't forgotten, and there are those who explore it and know it. But people simply didn't know about them, while now they know. They discover more and more, and this is important, and this is interesting.
And it's very precious, but, well, great gratitude to people, because that knowledge you told about and shared in the programs, that knowledge wasn't only heard and applied for themselves, but also there was a continuation of this wave. They carried this wave on.
Well, that's the point.
On such a global scale.
Well, that's the point. This is also a part of service to the spiritual world. When you feel this need for freedom, for love, when you experience it, you share it. Well, we've mentioned more than once that it's impossible to hold this aspiration to share this. Well, it's like the sun that you cannot hold within. You want to lighten the whole world with it. And this is wonderful.
And it keeps growing more and more.
And it's always like this.
Here, the most interesting thing is that if you share the spiritual, if it overfills you, then it increases.
If you share spiritual love, the more you share it, the more you get. That's what was said. 100-fold will return to you. That's what was meant. But it's not when you have given someone $100 and you're waiting for a return.
But 200 for you?
Yes, 10,000, because 100-fold must return. It won't, and it's not the point whether it will return or not. This is just a piece of paper which you won't take with you. While God's love is exactly what guarantees you the future. So, what question are we coming to now?
Of service.
There's a path of service. Service may be different. It may be total commitment, and there's the way you've just talked about when people feel and share from their heart. And there is, let's say, a very simple formula that allows people to realize what personality is, right? This is not service to the spiritual world. This is service to the angel within oneself. Service to oneself in order to give this angel at least some kind of freedom, so that the person would be able to realize that he is not a beast and escape from this dictatorship. To learn how to stand against that nonsense which is imposed and which makes life miserable. To put it simply, to gain happiness and feel real love, right? Not an illusory person-to-person love that is exactly dictated by this beast, but the real one within the person. And to get closer to freedom, what is necessary for this? For an ordinary person, because people often ask this question, the very first steps, and a person understands that he is there. Sometimes he feels something, but in an instant he gets distracted and has lost everything, and thoughts bite him again. The person doesn't know how to get rid of them, of this consciousness, and he starts to hush this up. Well, lying to himself that everything is fine is great. Well, how's that to himself? Consciousness tells him, and he agrees to that. Consciousness says, you just can't. You won't succeed. And what should a person do in order to succeed? This is a simple question, because lots of people need this right now. People who are looking at us and say, yes, tell us about an easy way, without all your complicated, sophisticated words, because you've understood something, you know something, you've overcome, and how can I learn? We need to tell it to a person in a simple words. So what advice could you give?
There is such a point that concerns basically everyone's development, because misunderstanding that arises in every person is connected exactly with what one should develop in oneself. It's the point of developing the personality, right? Personality is the one who feels, so this perception goes for the personality.
Yet how can one find personality?
Yes, so how to find it?
A simple technique.
Yes.
Well, the simplest tool that can be used by anyone, by any person sitting at this table with us now. How can he use the simplest tool in order to realize that he is dual? That there are both an angel and a beast within him. And a simple.
We've talked about duality many times, right? Meaning to find this inner...
But this is impossible.
Yes.
The most interesting thing is that this friend of ours sitting opposite me will never be able to stand against the system, Satan, whatever we call it, never, if this person doesn't understand that he's a personality. How can my ordinary good friend become an angel? How does he need to understand that he's a personality? What tool should he use? Well, it's you who ask me all the time, so I've decided.
What a surprise!
Well, so?
To accumulate this different experience, completely different, yes, different experience of feelings, of what lives inside, flares up, to realize that...
Again, you're speaking higher categories.
May I?
My friend who is sitting here doesn't understand this. He's saying, you're talking about experience, perception through feelings, while he doesn't know what the perception through feelings is.
I think I know what our friend should do. He should try to listen to us, not with consciousness, because now we will hardly be able to explain in words that...
Again, you're talking about the category of people who are able to perceive through feelings. We'll talk about them also today, because I have several friends here. But as for the one who was growing exactly under the system's pressure due to certain circumstances, he had to overcome a lot, to think, to survive, and now his consciousness dominates his personality, and he can't tell where the personality is and where consciousness is. He's constantly confused, and he's trying to do something by means of consciousness. He doesn't manage, but he feels that there is something there, what we're talking about. Something touches him. He understands that, yes, something's coming from you. Here, but how? How can I learn? How can I get established on this path? And there's the only way to do it, through personal experience. Otherwise, all this, as in any religion, remains an empty talk. I should do this bow here, and what will I get? You see, well, it's not magic in order to get something material, but where is inner freedom, where is joy, where is love? Even if something happens, it happens. A flesh has a curve today, but tomorrow it's even worse, and he can't get closer to this state which he had. So how to help my friend? What practical thing should he do, without speaking higher categories?
To feel the processes that are expanding from within to the outside?
Again, to feel the processes from the outside. And again, you are speaking of... I understand.
There is a practical example of, well, how it helped us at the time, and what you had advised repeatedly. It's keeping a diary. That is, to start writing down one's thoughts.
That's right. And here, look.
To set forth what is coming from consciousness.
What hinders my friend? Consciousness hinders him.
Right, consciousness.
It doesn't allow him to keep a diary.
Right.
It has forbidden him. And how has it forbidden? What will you write down? You understand everything. You know everything. You don't need this. Why would you write it down if you remember everything? While in fact, the good friend of mine listened to the program, got a search, but in 5 minutes he already forgot it. He actually forgets absolutely everything. Why? Because consciousness doesn't give him this understanding. It stands, well, a beast is a beast. This is the most terrifying, the very first guardian on the way to the spiritual world. It immediately distracts him, it immediately carries him away. Well, he's my good friend, but he's a slave of the system. But we should help him, you see, how to get through all these shackles. Because consciousness forbids him. Even when he's ready and takes a seat, starts writing down, there is emptiness in his head. Consciousness says, what are you going to write down? You don't have anything to write about, and why are you writing it down? Well, so he has written it. The next day, consciousness tells him the same.
Write it down.
The day after tomorrow, it's the same. But I understand that this experience is for those people who feel more. And they will do it, and they will write everything down, and they will study this. But sorry, it's for those who feel a need to serve. They will detail everything. Whereas my friend is working. He has a job, he's studying. Well, it doesn't matter, he's a busy person. He's just lying on a sofa watching TV series. Well, he has a right. But at the same time, he wants to become happy, to start with something. So for him, as for a layman, as for a searching person, what has to be done? The very first steps. You see, I can't hear this from you, just as they can't hear this from us. And this is the problem, that people, even feeling a bit, even getting surges sometimes, they don't know what to do. Well, isn't that so? Well, it is. This is what makes them doubt, hang around and all the rest. And what is the simplest example, or rather technique, and the best tool? In order not to experience evil, not to experience suffering and pain, what should one do? One should reject bad thoughts. When a person realizes that he wants to be happy, and my friend does want to experience joy. He needs the simplest technique, and the simplest tool is to reject, say, oppressive thoughts. For instance, a thought comes into your head that you're suffering, you're poor, but you say, no, I'm happy, I love God. Just like that, even in a form of a game, just to start playing. Forbid your consciousness to judge anyone, to hate, to be angry with anyone. Just forbid it. Say, no, I won't do it. Consciousness says, this is a bad person, but you say, why is he bad? What makes him worse than me? Just to answer like this, to counter, to force a part of consciousness, you should understand one thing. Well, my dear friend, remember one thing. You are financing your thoughts. It's really so. You don't order thoughts in your head. They come from outside. Do you have doubts? Just sit and think. Let's think about a butterfly. Yes, you can see a butterfly, can imagine it in your head right now. Try to keep this butterfly in your head for 5 minutes, and you will realize that you won't be able to keep it. Fish will come into your head, monkeys, lemons, oranges, a lame neighbor, well, whoever you want. And this butterfly will be mixed with them. But you just try to keep the butterfly. You won't succeed. Why? Because you are not the master of consciousness. And when you realize that you are not the master of consciousness, but precisely with your attention you are financing that which you are investing and paying your attention to this, right? Meaning, what is in your head, that you are kind of financing. And precisely this financing, meaning energy spending, bring these or those thoughts to life. Later on, they can influence you, influence your life, and the life of people who surround you. Why? Because having accepted a thought that this person is bad, you start treating him as a bad person. You reject him. And what makes him worse than you? Here's a simple question. But when this thought comes and you say, no, hold on, I don't need this thought. I won't judge this person. Just as simple as that. And you have refused and think about what is good. Consciousness is trying again to foist some bad thought, evil, fear or hatred on you. It is trying to belittle or elevate you, whereas you just say, no, I want about love, about joy, however, not in understanding of person-to-person love, but about love in the highest understanding. Just be happy. Just be happy that you're breathing. Even if you're ill, even if you have a hard time and feel bad, look that there is green grass, that there is blue sky, even if it's gray covered with clouds. Well, what's the difference? Even if it's raining and there is a storm, look at that rain and storm. Understand one thing, that in a short while you won't see this. Why? Because life is too short, and what seems a distant future to you, it will happen today, right now. It's just that years will fly by, and this now will come. Well, it's just like an experiment. You can set a date in your life. It doesn't matter, will it be an hour or 2, a month, a day, a year or 10 years, definitely this now will come. Time passes very quickly, and everything that seemed to be far away becomes the past. This is true. The only question is where these years have gone, into nothingness? Or have you used them for something important, something necessary? Something important necessary in human understanding, that which the system tells about, is to build a house, well actually, as always, to provide for your everyday life. I won't say that it is bad, and you should do this. This, you have to do this. Your body is your car, and you have to keep it clean and healthy. Well, and it's normal. Consciousness must work. Body must work. It must earn and support itself. This is actually a natural process. It's not even discussed, but it shouldn't dictate to you as a personality. And in order to realize that you are a personality, you start forbidding consciousness to accept bad thoughts and start accepting only good thoughts. So you say, I don't want what is bad, I want what is good, I want to rejoice. It starts to oppress you. For example, someone bothers you. But you go outside and just look at the gray sky, at the rain, or at the sun, and simply be happy. Just put away the thought and rejoice at what you see. It doesn't really matter, even if you look at, say, torn wallpaper. Be happy that you see it and that it is there. And this joy, It is little, tiny, and quick passing because consciousness is trying to erase it. But if you have experienced it once, you can always increase it once again. And every time, every day, you will increase and intensify your every experience. And finally, you'll realize that you dictate to consciousness. And only those thoughts come which you want, because you reject others. You start feeling that there is love. You start feeling that there is joy. And life becomes more beautiful. Even if you feel pain in your body, you're ill, you have health problems at this moment. But these are the problems with your temporary body. While we are speaking about eternity, personality is the one who feels body pain. Consciousness doesn't feel this pain. But there is another option. It feels body pain for as long as it's bound to the body. And that's the point. For as long as it's bound to consciousness, because it's precisely consciousness that tells about body pain. And if we take a look at what a body is, yes, it's a set of molecules and so on. What is pain? It is an electrical signal which comes and irritates. And all this, the illusion, turns into unbearable pain that personality feels. It suffers and so on. But all this ends, all this passes. And it ends very quickly, while that happiness and joy which you will form may remain forever. And that's the point. This is the first step to understand that you are a personality. This is the first step to an angel. And let's say the first step in opposition to the beast. And it can give you an opportunity to gain freedom, real freedom, freedom from Satan, freedom from the beast. It is the most simple, not to hold a grudge. And tell me, isn't this mentioned in religions? Well, and who understood this? Don't think negatively, don't do this. But consciousness says, you show me this kind of person, right? I will look at him, and if he lives like this, then I will also do. It immediately reads about saints and says, but these are saints. That's how consciousness works. It always casts doubts on everything, always contradicts, and so on. We have already told about it more than once. People who call themselves, let's say, almost saints, spiritually mature and so forth, they were developed spiritually to such an extent that they were leading one of the spiritual trends. But they also demanded to execute Jesus Christ. They didn't feel him, the Son of God. And what can we talk about, right? And in order for this not to happen, a person should work on himself. And thank God, today we know that there are more and more people all over the world who are becoming spiritually free. Precisely free in spirit from the dictatorship of Satan. And this is wonderful. And many people feel, really feel, they feel that there is love, there is God. And these are not fairy tales, and they can already speak up about this. Well, isn't it wonderful? It's amazing.
Here I'd like to add that those people who understand that they shouldn't think about bad things, yet many of them don't notice when they switch to this very point. When?
Yes, this is another problem. When a substitution takes place, right? For instance, a person thinks about good things. He forces his consciousness to think of good things. He avoids bad thoughts, and suddenly say, he has dropped something. Stooped down, picked it up. He's got distracted. And a thought already comes. It has fallen. It could have got broken. And sorrow emerges. And there's immediately a subsequent thought that a neighbor is scoundrel, right? And say why I've borrowed his drill for 5 minutes and I'm not giving it back for a month, while he, the scoundrel, doesn't even want to greet me. Well, here you are.
And here you have answered a very disturbing question. At the time, this also helped me a lot, regarding the fact that very often people ask a question, well, what kind of thoughts come from the animal nature, yes, from consciousness, and which thoughts are right, good, and aimed at?
There are no good thoughts.
Yes, right.
This is for everyone to have an understanding. Thoughts don't come from the spiritual world. This is true. All thoughts in your head which you feel and experience, all this is Satan's dictatorship. Satan can tell you about God. Again, what is Satan? In religious understanding, it is someone, well, with horns and ears. Yet, what is Satan in fact? Satan is programs. It is information. Your consciousness is part of the program. We have talked a lot about this, but it's to simplify understanding. Here the girls have tablets, right? There are programs which draw everything. If we look at the programs written in them, there are zeros and ones, but they see numbers, they see pictures. However, those consist of zeros and ones. This is how the system itself operates. This is how our consciousness, which is part of the system, works.
A written code.
Yes, just a written code, but it is spoiling our life. That's the purpose of this code. It must hold the tail and hold tightly everyone who isn't worthy of the Lord's world. And everyone who is unworthy of it, who cannot step over, who gets tempted by everything earthly and mortal, he dooms himself to what? To suffering, to death. But what a human being has the right to life. And they say, it's unfair. How can it be unfair? All wars begin under dictation of consciousness. All spite that is coming, all greed, all envy, all human meanness, all these guys is your consciousness. And everything starts here, but it starts because you finance it. You choose it. And you yield to these temptations, and you act to do everything yourselves. Is it God who told a person, kill another person? Is it God who said, spit on your friend's back, deceive, steal? Is it God who criticizes the other fellow within you? No. Is it God who's telling you that you're worthless, that you can do nothing, and you're capable of nothing? Well, isn't that so? No. All this is consciousness. Any thought is consciousness. Any judgment is consciousness. Say, a question sounds, then how if all this is consciousness and part of this? Then what is angel? An angel is precisely the one who feels. It is the angel who perceives this world under dictation of consciousness. He doesn't see it, but he feels. And the inner component, the feeling part, is exactly what many people in Universal Grain video were talking about, yes? It is that inner perception through feelings. It is perceived holistically and differently, not as through consciousness. But it is very simple to find and liberate this angel. And it is very simple to realize that you are, pardon me, a personality, but not a part of the program with these written zeros and ones. This means to start forbidding your consciousness to impose on what you don't need, to impose system directives. That is bad thoughts, bad deeds, and everything evil. And once you start falling asleep happily, you'll be waking up happily too. In the beginning, of course, as many people know from their experience, as they are telling, yes, they hold on in the daytime, but at night thoughts come which dictate. Well, it's just in the beginning. When a person intensifies his work on himself, then what happens at night as well?
If something predominates in him, this is exactly what happens.
Perfectly true. That is, even at night,
He goes to God.
he goes to God, and no one can overpower, because it's in fact very simple to avoid a program. The only necessary thing is what? To make a bit of effort. But that is exactly the point. If a person doesn't make efforts, if he doesn't feel, whereas everyone can feel, only afterwards deadening and rejecting in oneself everything divine. Why does he reject? Because consciousness dictates. It is beneficial for consciousness that a human becomes a subpersonality, or speaking in religious terms, that he goes to hell. Why? Because consciousness continues to exist with him. The program continues working. While the program self-identifies, we have already talked about this more than once, it perceives itself as I. That's why a person has multiple I. Well, everything is very simple. And it turns out that it's beneficial for consciousness that a human becomes a subpersonality, while for a personality this is death. It's not beneficial. This is a constant slavery, you are constantly being used. But many people may say, why don't I feel myself as a personality? But you do feel yourself as a personality, that's the trouble. Everyone can feel oneself. This oppression, this inner suffering, it is you as a personality who feels this. Whereas all your avarice, all your anger and everything negative that you've accumulated, that is what consciousness is. And many people also say, it's too late to re-educate myself, even a simple method. to start thinking about what is good. Just make your consciousness think only about good and finance only good things, whereas brush aside everything bad. Don't think about it. They say, it's too late to re-educate myself. I have already grown up. I've already kind of formed. Who is speaking at this moment? It is consciousness speaking. While this person is in pridefulness, it seems to him that he is thinking correctly, reprimanding everyone, lecturing. This is a convenient position for consciousness, whereas in fact neither age matters nor anything else matters. Any person can do it at any time. If you embarked on the path, then stand on it. Work every day, all the time. This doesn't hinder either intellectual activity if you are a researcher. This doesn't prevent you from working with your hands if you work with your hands. It hinders absolutely nothing. Just hold on and don't let unnecessary thoughts in. Thoughts should work, meaning fulfill everything related to work and serve you. That is, first of all, you must become an angel inside yourself. That is a master over your beast, while the beast should work for you. Just imagine, I will give a simple example. You've got a dog, and eventually this little dog, let's say a chihuahua, you know, such a little dog with big ears, and eventually it becomes your king, right? By its glance, you run on your toes to get its food, and barely turns around while you already run and turn over its pillow or something else. A lot of such things often happen in life.
People have grown up expecting some appraisals from others so much and relying on what other people actually think about them that at some moment they're just living a life which is not theirs.
Masks.
That they live out the life of each person they meet on their way, trying to satisfy.
Just look, we have discussed it more than once, right? People wear masks all the time. They regularly imitate someone, and so on. Why? Because consciousness is arranged like that. It doesn't give life. In fact, not a single person can answer who he is.
The real one.
Who he is real. No one, not a single person can answer, because he is multiple.
Of course, and here...
He can't find himself. That's why life of any person is foolish if one doesn't live by the spiritual world. And this is indeed so. One considers himself to be a great painter because he paints. He's in this mask. While he feels sadness, he is happy only when he is praised, when he is exalted. That's when he has some satisfaction. It is temporary and quick passing, because he realizes that it is not giving anything. Anyway, everything remains empty inside. They have praised and extolled him. They left and no one cares about you with your paintings. The same about a builder, the same about, I don't know, even a politician. He has deceived lots of people, has risen, has been elected, has been running for something else, it seems so, right? And then he realizes that all this is empty. Life has passed, and what's next? Whatever job we take, no matter what person is doing, isn't it?
It's just so sad that...
Until one finds himself, all this is foolishness, is mask-wearing imitation and so on. The system always imitates. We have discussed it more than once. A singer is singing a song, you're listening. As soon as you've invested attention, you start listening carefully, you start enjoying it, you get carried away. The very next moment a thought comes that you are singing yourself. Imitation. You are on the stage singing and people are applauding you. So wait, what do you like? The performance of the song, the aria by the singer, or how everybody applauds him and envies him? As soon as your consciousness has imposed on you the thought about his greatness, it immediately tries to extol you. Well,
Idealization of the image.
this is so funny and foolish. There are such manipulations. As a matter of fact, even little kids aged 5-6 years should be aware of these manipulations, and they should keep their animal on a leash. Then a spiritually free society will grow up, as it was at some point in the time after Atlantis.
It's a very important and serious topic, because it turns out that the precious attention which a person needs for merging with the spiritual world, just to understand where it is lost during a day, right? And so...
Well, constantly, because consciousness is attuned to this. As soon as you become consciousness, you've already lost it. The fact that it can make you think about something good might also be a part of manipulation. It will immediately substitute it with something negative, and self-assessment starts. So at the very first stages, the most important thing is to monitor what you are being fed with. Just as simple as that. You won't eat if you are served, pardon me, nails instead of some dish. Well, there are people, they eat those. I agree. There are a few only. One ate an airplane, another one ate a bicycle. If he likes it, God bless him with good health. But in fact, an ordinary person will not eat nails, stones, or anything like that. He's not a duck, isn't he? To eat a duck is one thing, but to eat stones is something different. So why do we swallow and finance all the thoughts piled off onto us? What for?
completely mindlessly, automatically, without understanding, without separating oneself from consciousness.
Absolutely right. While here one should be a gourmet, and a very choosy one. Choose only happiness, joy, and so on. But now many people parry by saying, how can I choose joy if around is only and I am being? It starts exactly from this. Here is around and you're a being, but you rejoice. And nothing will change. What will change if you're in sorrow, crying, pull your hair out, cuss out everyone? What will change? Will your suffering do anything good for anyone? No, it won't. It won't do anything, and you will not feel better.
This story which you've mentioned just now, here is around and I am being, is going on since early childhood.
It is always like that.
Because if to observe, a person is always building some relationships.
Always.
Either in kindergarten or in school.
Yes.
With peers, with partners, with schoolmates.
And there's always confrontation.
Yes, and there's always confrontation.
In assessment and confrontation, this is how the system works. But look at the behavior of, let's say, 2 chickens, 2 puppies, and 2 lion cubs, 2 baby elephants, and 2 children. After all, they behave absolutely the same way. Why? Because the animal part is intensely developing. Excuse me, but is there anyone among us who develops the spiritual component in kids? Where can a child obtain it? To make a kid pray, strive for God, means to get another Jugashvili, right? Why? Because hatred and rejection arise in a person. He has no love. But what should a person feel? Love. He should feel it as a personality. Personality should develop, and perception through feelings too, because that's the way it is.
It's just that even this phrase, yes, kind of coming from consciousness, that I'll be happy when I fix my relationships, but the question is, who should you fix these relationships with? Not with another person, first of all. That is...
By no means, with yourself.
What kind of relationships does every person look for in the first place? The need of these aspirations.
A person seeks a need, let's say everyone's need is the need for peace, for happiness and joy, for freedom. This is what we're talking about. The first thing that a person seeks is freedom, but consciousness forces him to look for it, this freedom, in the external. But internally, a human is striving for freedom from exactly the dictatorship of consciousness. Why? Because, as we've already started talking about it, he feels like a downtrodden chicken when an angel becomes, let's say, fully hounded by the animal nature, and he sees nothing, understands nothing, and feels nothing. And how can an angel feel in a person? In no way, when an angel is being gnawed and dictated. A human thinks that this is who he is. This is my character, this is who I am. But whose directive is this? Character. We've seen a lot of people with various characters, right? Who become wonderful, amazing and free people.
Exactly.
Isn't it so? It is.
Well, you've touched upon such a point about what is being implanted by parents since childhood. Indeed, there is even a whole branch in psychology. It covers what psychologists who work in schools and universities face. That is, when they work with people who are growing up. People not understanding in adulthood where these patterns come from. That is, you can't do anything, such directives which come from the very...
Which enslave.
Enslave. And so in adulthood, this shyness, this resentment, envy and anger already appear.
Of course.
All these patterns that are being formed.
But here again, we're simply taking the development of human consciousness. In this way, consciousness is formed. And how is the child's personality being formed? It is simply not formed. Can you give examples of how your personality was being developed? The spiritual component of perception of love, joy, supreme freedom, and everything else through feelings? You can't.
Well, actually, there is just an experience of the fact that in childhood you certainly
felt. And now let's take, after all, every child feels that there is something. He's much freer than others, but consciousness is just as active.
Well, there are both body and consciousness,
Correct.
But you still feel yourself free.
Right.
Yes, but a certain moment comes when it is lost, this freedom.
Right.
Meaning it goes away somewhere, it disappears.
Right.
These directives.
But any child is evidently dual. He still has purity and freedom because consciousness is not so strong. It is being formed. But at the same time, he is cunning and capable of any meanness. Why? Because, let's say, prohibition limits aren't really set yet in that very consciousness. I emphasize, in consciousness, but no way in the development of personality. However, every child feels that there is something more, that the world does not end here.
Yes, but there is some...
This stage is interesting. Well, we have such a community. Why? Because cartoons are turned on, all the information that comes from three-dimensionality. And, excuse me, a person is being formed under the dictation of consciousness. All the information that he perceives is being processed, assimilated, and it forms a person. And what does it mainly form? The animal component. It doesn't form a spiritual orientation in a person. Why? Because we've again touched upon, well, no matter what we turn on, TV, radio, internet, all the information we have, it's continuous negativity, continuous blockage and precisely development, let's say, enhancement of the animal component dominance. We have almost no examples of spiritual feats, of good and joy. There are almost none. Why? Because market conditions are such that consciousness is attracted by killers, heroes, superheroes, and those blockbusters. All this is being shown so people gladly go there, yes? Whereas if you make a film about a spiritual person who was fighting with his own consciousness and eventually won, such a life experience, well, who will go to watch it? No one. Well, guys, if 1, 2, or 3 times they make only this, and neither make nor show anything else, fashion will eventually change. We should recall what Bernard Shaw said, right? Fashion and beauty, let's say, as well as understanding of everything else is imposed on a human being. That is, this is nothing other than dictatorship. But again, let's go back to what was said in the Atlantis video, yes? let's say the pre-Sumerian time. Well, the Sumerians is the wrong name, but what's the difference? After all, we know the Sumerians as the first civilization, when the first civilization appeared. And what is a civilization in modern society, which is imposed on our consciousness? When it became a state, right? That is, and it became a state when who appeared? A lord.
Some kind of a leader.
Yes, a master. And while there was no master, there was, pardon me, nothing. But now we are referring to history, already to archaeology. It turns out that before there appeared priests, leaders and dictators, those who pulled out hearts from still alive people and sacrificed them allegedly to some gods. Meaning, not a priest sacrificed himself, the priest sacrificed particularly a human. What for? For others to feel fear, to obey and the like. After all, before the power of these manipulators, there existed a culture, as they say now. What kind of culture was it? The same people, the same civilization, the same buildings, but people live without evil. And that was the point. Until the descendants of the Atlanteans came and taught them how to be slaves, how to stop being free, just note, and how to be slaves. That's what was taught. And it prevails, and it goes on and prevails. And today we unfortunately don't have a good experience for development of the personality. Well, at the same time, everything can be changed. Everything depends on people and their choice. And to be honest, thanks to the universal grain video, which was created by people themselves, there's still hope for the better. That people can do a lot, and that's true.
People themselves have shown that they can.
People themselves have shown that they can. This is wonderful. Everything is possible. But when human community decides to change something, it changes it. And while humankind, lives under the dictation of its own consciousness, it is unlikely to happen. In fact, everything is simple. When people understand how they should live, they will start living.
Right.
But this can be done jointly. Simply to actually stop seeing bad in each other. We must learn to see good in each other and to contribute to the development of this good in one another. And then it will all fall into places.
Yes, we should support each other and not be shy to be kind and do something for another person. After all,
People should learn to feel each other.
learn to feel another person.
Right.
Learn to thank him, to love, to express, to feel.
I'm saying it simpler. Look, people are dual, right?
Right.
There are angels, there are beasts. And people face a choice to create a society of angels or a society of beasts. Isn't that so?
It's also necessary somehow to put this love at the head of everything, because very often during the day, the system, perhaps even while you're performing some work moments in service or something else, it diverts attention even to some little things, as if some kind of busyness or something else gets activated.
Well, this is for sure. After all, it's its function to pull the blanket on itself, you see?
Basically, it often happens that the system diverts human attention from love, from what is really important. Perhaps, by the way, this also originates from the moments of childhood, when some task was more important than expression of love.
This is how consciousness works. Attention, which it consumes, is the energy for its existence. It does everything in order to distract you. As soon as you have invested higher concentration of attention and lost, I will repeat it once more. I once gave an example. You should invest 90% of your attention into spiritual development. 90%, I will say it in a different way, of the food for the angel and the beast, you should give to the angel, and 10% to support the functions of this beast, which should do all the work, engage in intellectual, physical labor, support and sustain your body, take care of your daily life here, and at the same time, not to palm off to you anything bad, wrong and harmful to you. You see? Then everything will be right.
Also often,
but when we start to invest the power of our attention and divide it disproportionately, let's say not 90 to 10, but vice versa, then we lose.
In addition, I'd like to say, and what about how? Give me a mechanism.
A negative thought is coming to you. Reject it. Simply reject it. What do you need it for? Think about love, think about good. It doesn't work out very well at first, but if you do it, it will work out. Simply think about happiness. Make yourself think and accept thoughts only about happiness, only about good. And eventually you will realize that you are personality, not consciousness. Why? You'll understand that it is you who dictates, and who is that one who dictates, and you can feel him. And as soon as you begin to feel, you shouldn't lose it. Here you need to fight for this perception through feelings, and to develop it. Consciousness will attack. Well, in which sense attack? It attacks while it's full, but it's you who feed him. Therefore, it's very simple. Don't support thoughts, don't support emotions that are negative, bad, not good ones. Only positivity. Evaluate any person only from the positive side. Don't criticize. Understand, feel. Since a person has done something negative, it means that he, well, let's say, he has done it under the dictation of his own consciousness. It's the beast in him who has done it. It's not the angel who has done it. While blaming both the angel and the beast in another person, it's unfair. What does the angel have to do with this? His angel is undeveloped, just like yours, since you judge him. Well, isn't that so? Therefore, it is necessary to keep, say, all your thoughts under such light surveillance. Let's say it carefully. Right?
There is also a topic on which people often simply pour out their attention. It's the topic of envy. And what does the system say? That definitely what one person has, you cannot have a priori, as the law of physics, that there increases...
Oh, there are so many topics, Tatiana. Really, in fact, there are a lot of topics. It's envy, it's hatred, and we can talk about this forever. And every person knows on what and where his consciousness catches him. It's not important. Everything negative that oppresses you and doesn't give you a truly free worldview, it's all negative, you see. It can satisfy you, raise emotions, release adrenaline or something else negative.
Various forms.
But these are various forms, of course. However, the essence is the same, to distract from life, to manipulate you like a monkey. But are you a monkey? Well, a simple question. Do you need this? Live happily. Why suffer when you can be happy?
Exactly.
This is really so.
Also, there is such a moment of misunderstanding among viewers. They commented under the program with your participation. It was written there, just live, just love. There was such a substitution from consciousness among people, that to just love and to just live, it means going with the flow, doing nothing, not engaging in anything, and just...
This is exactly the dictation of consciousness.
Yes.
There you are, like an amoeba, doing nothing.
Yes.
Where the wind blows, there you float. That's inactiveness. Well, some religions were based on this, some in any case still are. Not to step on an insect, not to do anything, and so on. Thus you will remain nowhere and will be no one. You will be a lazybones. Consciousness twists whatever it wants. The first thing is proactive attitude. We say it once again. When a human really perceives this God's love, this sun inside, he can't sit still. Well, isn't that so? How can you not share this? How can you sit and greedily hold it? You can be greedy about a reflection of the moon, which creates an illusion that you've understood something, but it is not the sun. This is merely a distorted light coming from the moon, and it's precisely what causes those understandings, allegedly. All this actually comes from consciousness. These are the games of consciousness. Whereas when it is true, when it is alive, when it overfills you, then, excuse me, you won't be lying on a couch and dreaming.
Yes, moreover, a personality means action.
When you understand that there is God, when you feel this love coming from Him, well, and you understand that so many angels are jailed and remain in a miserable state because of their beasts that young them as chickens, then yes, it starts aching right here. And you wish to give a bit of freedom, to help. It is their choice. One cannot dictate. Don't do this, do that. No. A human has the right to choose. If one wants to be a chicken, let one be. But if one wants to become an angel, one should become an angel. It's impossible to hold this. And inaction is unrealistic here. Inaction means the lie from consciousness. This is a substitution.
Yes, because personality means
Of course.
inner action that is aimed at creative actions.
Personality is a part of the spiritual world.
Yes.
And being, so to say, in an oppressed state, it is striving for home. It is moving. And since it is moving, much is changing.
Every person wants that affinity
Yes.
and to become an angel.
And who forbids him?
But consciousness draws him a picture that he'll become an angel someday.
It's the first in the choice when a human awakes, when he feels. That's when he becomes an angel. Though a little plucked and a little weak, but an angel.
But this is already the beginning. This is already a movement.
This is a perfect understanding of the fact that now you're an angel, not someday.
This is already the beginning, of course. Well, put it simply, a human is both an angel and a beast. The only question is who dominates, and what will remain after a short period of time we call life, the angel or the beast, dead or alive.
Not to succumb to panic that drives a person to achieving this, but to feel that now you're feeling God, that now you're being in this.
And this is what you should live for. An angel is precisely a part of the sun. This being itself radiates. There is true love. It is love in the spiritual world. It is love which is boundless or divine love. There are no gender differences in it. There is nothing in it. It is unity of people. Indeed, it's the unity of people in love. Why? Because in that world there is nothing except happiness and love. There are no negative emotions there. Well, it's for those who neither understand nor know. Why there are no negative emotions? Because they cannot exist there. There are no emotions there at all. There's happiness. There's love there. This is what that world is, because it's the world of God. Whereas for people, consciousness always tries to copy. And so it inserts the concept of love into a framework of affection and responsibility. But again, what is behind this affection, responsibility and everything else, right? Manipulation, comfort, hormones and all the rest. While in actual fact, if we take and consider without bias any of these amorous states, we will come to an understanding of relationships between two people. And they don't have love as such in the higher understanding. They always watch over each other. They always try to manipulate one another. They always want something from each other. And what is there everywhere around? There's first and foremost egoism. And the other person is detached. And even when they say that we kind of feel each other and so on, eventually, of course, they feel. The system mixes up. Consciousnesses of the couple start working almost like of a single person due to the long side-by-side stay. And they can even sit and be silent, just like spiritual people. But they do feel each other, right? Well, it's possible to feel and no words are needed because there's a single language. But it's when people, so to say, have escaped from the embrace of consciousness a little bit. But consciousness copies just in the same way. When people have got used to each other to such an extent that they live in a single little world, especially old people, they start simultaneously inserting identical remarks. Why? Because consciousness is already almost one for the two. There are already two viewers with a little more actors on the stage. The system is simply saving on them. But may this be called love? No. Because this is always suffering, and here, note that again everywhere, in various novels, in movies, in all mass media, which force people to follow patterns and which encode consciousness, everywhere love is described as suffering, tragedy, something else, meaning it is filled with some worries and emotions. And now let's consider what do we know about emotions, about suffering and about all the rest. This is what forces us to invest attention. That is literally to pay for someone else's sins or to pay for the emptiness, simply put. Or using the language of economics, it's a bad business. So it turns out that people waste their spiritual powers on what is empty. Yet, can people coexist, say married couples, and how can it be otherwise? If we have such a lifestyle, if we have abandoned the communal order, there's already such an individual one. People like it, they live so. Well, for God's sake, let them live. If there's such an order, so let it be. Elementary respect and understanding of each other are already a basis of family happiness. But when in the family there's someone who is more or less spiritually free, he or she understands the other person. They understand what the septon field is telling their spouse right now and so on. But if they are imbued with respect and let's say they feel comfortable, again, comfortable and convenient with this person, they will never do anything bad to him or her and will help him or her. They are in three-dimensionality. Certain manipulation will take place anyway. It's impossible to force a person to follow the spiritual path or vice versa. This is his choice. However, joint habitation in three-dimensionality still leads to certain manipulation of each other, right? That is, someone must wash the floor, someone must go shopping and so on. Well, and here the tri-consciousness snaps into action. Wanting, not wanting, bargaining, I will do that, you will do this, and the like. Elementary agreements with elements of manipulation. So one shouldn't make a tragedy out of it. But to call these things love, well, say it's sort of possible, but quotation marks should be used. What kind of love? Earthly love or spiritual love? But people often confuse it. That's the problem. However, if we talk about these things frankly and the way they really are, it can break the family order, because people will start copying without grasping the essence. And to understand all this, one should develop spiritually. Then everything is simplified. And people don't leave their families and they don't ruin them. But on the contrary, if someone really steps on the spiritual path, families get stronger. They cannot be ruined even if one person in the family has already stepped on the spiritual path and is engaged in spiritual development, while the other one is engaged in or is keen on some religion. Because any religion leads to God anyway. Well, if a person, let's say, is just keen on a religion, he performs right something else, but continues to live the same way as an ordinary person lives, will it hinder them? No, it won't. A person who is following the spiritual path can enter any temple and visit any congregation. This doesn't hinder him in any way. Because where God's name is mentioned, he should be comfortable. Because at least they speak about his home. It's the same as if you emigrated or, well, were forced to stay for a while in another country. You recall your home, you feel good, and you know that this is your home. You know that you will return there sooner or later. If there is some gathering of people and they speak about your native city or your native village, well, of course it's interesting to be there. And why not? Why not communicate with these people, like-minded ones, right? Therefore, this is normal, this is natural. As a rule, only in rare cases when a person seeks love to one person, whereas mostly they, as there was an old movie, I am, she says, walking and men are falling and falling down like stocks. Well, it is consciousness telling, I'll become so beautiful just like that. I'm walking and men are falling and falling down. It is consciousness telling, well, this is consciousness. And regards men, it's vice versa, so that all women ride on them. Why does he need all women? Did he ask himself? What will he do with them? And here is precisely, all are mine, everybody loves me. Mind you, not I love. Nobody strives or asks, I love. Everybody strives to be loved by people, by God, but where are you? Where is your love? But until a person learns to love, meaning until a person himself becomes a source of these spiritual powers, the alat powers, he will be going around in circles and will be listening to his actors. That is, the person will be deluding himself. Why does this happen? First of all, because in our childhood we are taught to do the right things, not to do something. Don't do this, it's not good. Don't do that, it's not good. And this you can do, it is good. This is what we are being taught. But we are not being taught what's behind that, which make us act one or another way. Even in childhood, to do what is not good. But what's behind it? It is precisely a thought that stands behind it, which we don't generate, we perceive it. And these thoughts make us act and behave badly towards others, even towards ourselves. They make us commit certain actions that often harm ourselves, and we pay for them ourselves thereafter. This is how our consciousness works. If, in childhood, we were taught to monitor our thoughts, to control them, not to accept what is bad, and if we were told how to do this, then in adult life we wouldn't make mistakes either. We wouldn't strive to search for those who would love us, but we would really love others, would love life, would love God, would love each other, and the world would be totally different. This is banal, this is simple. This is simple indeed. But in order for this simple to become a reality for all people, everyone who understands this, who cares, who really cares, should perform an enormous hard work. Religions have existed for thousands of years. For as many years, wars have existed. For as many years, crimes and wrongdoings have existed. And for as many years, the best people hurt their families and friends very often. Why does this happen? Because, pardon me, we as people are manipulated by those who since ancient times were called demons. Why demons? And what is a demon? And here it would certainly be interesting to look back into antiquity when these expressions initially appeared and what they meant. A demon denotes an integral part of a human being. That is, a demon is the animal part of the human himself. If since childhood people understood that they had an angel and they had a demon and stood on the angel's side, if they were brought up with understanding that the demon would eventually lead them to the grave, it wouldn't give them life, wouldn't give them freedom. They would get rid of it already in childhood. In antiquity there was an interesting expression. If we translate it, let's say, into our modern language, it would sound approximately like this. A free person remains free even in jail, while a slave of his consciousness remains a slave even on the freedom.
There is such a moment of people's misunderstanding, how to communicate without complaints and without offenses. A woman wrote a question, how can I be around my relatives who provoke me into some offense, some bad emotions? That is, consciousness accuses a person of something, and she, perceiving by consciousness, gets offended.
Well, in fact, it's very simple. In a family or wherever a person is, one matter is always trying to dominate another matter. It doesn't happen that when two animals meet, let's say, that they exist peacefully. Always someone obeys someone else, and resistance is constantly going on. It doesn't matter whether it's in a family, at work, in any team, wherever one is. Always someone is offended at someone, someone hurts someone. These are games, games of consciousness. This is the dictatorship of the beast. And if someone tries to provoke you, or provokes into offense, yes, then why are you reacting? A simple question. And who is reacting in you? An angel will not react. An animal reacts to animal's reaction. Sorry, but if you control this process, control the thoughts that come to you from consciousness, and then your consciousness, your beast, tells you that you should be offended now, because you've been looked upon not in the right way. Listen, I don't care how the dog inside that person looked at me. Well, isn't that so?
It is.
Well, why should I be offended, excuse me, at this chihuahua who didn't look at me the right way? But my chihuahua tells me that I should be offended and that he's an enemy. What kind of enemy? Why should I live by offense when I can live happily? After all, the angelic component, that who the person really is, it won't do anything bad to me. To me, let's say, as the divine part within the human being too. Well, isn't that right? Well, it is. While what animals don't share among themselves doesn't concern me. And when my consciousness says that I should somehow react with offense, or that they try to harm me, they tell me, go do this, and I'm getting into the position out of principle, well, this is the biggest nonsense that can be. Especially in the family. In the family, it is necessary to understand that there should be a distribution of labor and duties, and help is needed. And if you have started to understand at least a little bit, then you shouldn't demand from your, let's say, family members that they all suddenly become angels because you decided to step on the spiritual path and still live under the dictation of your beast. It should be clearly distinguished from where and who and what dictates you. Well, isn't it right?
It is. One should try to be a human oneself, to act humanly oneself.
First of all, one should become a human oneself, of course. And it should be understood that if the animal part of someone close to me responded to me like that, well, I can only laugh. Well, I've tasted the chihuahua in my relative. Well, what can I do? Next time I should be more careful so that he doesn't get very angry and doesn't bite. Anyway, I'm not going anywhere. It's a relative.
Well, yes, but he bites and teases only if we ourselves tease and bite him.
If we provoke.
We provoke.
That is absolutely correct.
We are provoked and we provoke.
But if we communicate with the chihuahua carefully, it will be tender and gentle, right?
Yes. Simply love. Love more.
Not to provoke.
Not to provoke.
And to really love. And whom do we love? Chihuahua or angel? We love that component in a person which is really the angelic part.
Right.
And not the animal one. Who would like a mad dog?
But often people simply confuse the concept of love with dictatorship.
Well, it's just... If a person lives under the dictation of consciousness, then he loves power. But power is not love. One shouldn't confuse divine love, the real one, the one giving freedom and life, with banal human, let's say, claims coming from the person's animal nature.
Another common question from the audience is that they cannot get rid of such a point that they want to keep everything under control, some kind of planning that if something gets out of control, they necessarily need to return it back to track from which...
But what for? And who wants this?
It's comfortable.
It's a comfortable state of the animal component of the human oneself. The dog is comfortable this way, right? Inside a person, so that everything would be in order, a bowl is in place, a bone is in place, so that everything would be the way it wants. Sorry, alive people are around. They're living, everything is changing. Live simply.
Simply this feeling of control is actually...
The most important thing is to understand and to distinguish what comes from a person and who dictates in him. If a person is under the dictatorship of the animal, well, the animal will always be aggressive. Well, you should help to calm this animal down, but not respond to this. Well, I don't care what my neighbor's dog thinks of me. Well, this is really so. Why should I show off in front of it, right? Well, this is...
Right. There's also one more such question. Where does the person's most precious attention go? For instance, when he has planned some event and is spending a lot of attention precisely on guessing how it will be, how it will take place, meaning on expectation.
We've answered these questions more than once. Indeed, a person is striving, the person's consciousness directs him to estimations and reckoning. This is a sort of magic, right? And it involves him into this game. Whether it's some event or a meeting with someone, these actors in one's head start planning and playing it, like who has said what and to whom. Well, what's the difference for you? You do know the essence of the issue. These are games. Games are entertaining, like TV series, right?
Well, yes.
Which draw attention and force a person to engage in whatever possible, in foolishness. We're sitting and listening to this barking of dogs inside our head instead of living.
Instead of acting.
Instead of loving and being happy. Or we can stand up and go to do something.
After all, this is less costly than if you spend and spend this and endlessly.
Of course. But what does consciousness need? It needs the entire attention to be spent on it. Just like any animal. I've purposely given the example of a Chihuahua dog. After all, any animal draws attention to itself. It is very jealous if you paid attention to somebody. Even a little domestic dog will bite you, bark, and run under your feet.
To attract attention.
Well, just to make you take it in your arms, if it's a little dog, of course. While a big dog also draws attention, it's just that you cannot take it in your arms. But everyone nurtures any animal for oneself, right? Sometimes people walk around with elephants.
There is also such a point that people often say that they themselves don't understand how they get into a situation when they promise themselves that now there will be some changes inside, that I will never, say, be angry or hold a grudge at anyone.
I've understood everything.
Yes, and at a certain point, simply, well, right after some moment, they don't understand how they've already found themselves in a totally opposite situation.
And forgotten everything what they promised
Right,
themselves.
and there is sort of inner distrust of oneself. Who's actually this person who promised, I plan to act differently, while in fact, there is some result when an action has been taken, and who's been actually acting, and what should be done in such cases?
Well, nothing.
Meaning, this generates some...
You should simply understand that if actors in your head are arranging for something, then all this is a lie. If you as an angel have indeed chosen the control over your animal nature, then don't loosen it. If it has drawn your attention, well, shorten, so to say, put on a choke chain collar and shorten the leash. Hold it tighter, harder, and everything falls into place. It's very simple. Control it and don't let consciousness to manipulate you. If it tries to estimate something years ahead for you and to tell you that it's all right, now you engage in practices, now you will be working on yourself since you understood everything. It's consciousness that has understood. It agrees with you, but this way it sets you at ease, and it will immediately deceive you. You shouldn't negotiate it with it at all. Well, what's the difference if you talk to and negotiate it with your animal, so that it doesn't take this toy, or that your slippers are not a toy? This is just pointless. If your little animal likes it, it will play with your slippers anyway, right? Well, this is an animal. In the same way, you shouldn't negotiate here, but you can discipline and train. Say if you've punished your animal once or twice that it doesn't touch your slippers, well, it won't touch them again and it has no choice. Just like here. The attention which your consciousness eats is important for it, but for you as personality it's important as well. If you spend it not on the spiritual, not on increasing love, not on creation, but on, let's say, empty processes of being in some unnecessary fuss, well, it's the same as spending money allocated to you between paydays on some rubbish. Here's such a simple example, right? You received a salary payment, went shopping, bought not food for your body, and not some clothes for yourself, but food for animals. You went outside and fed it to them right away. Well, is this logical or not?
This is totally logical.
And then you try to survive for a month. Well, okay, you've survived a month somehow, but if you act in the same way the next month, then sorry, you won't survive long. Well, isn't that so?
It is. And this very point when, while a person resides here and understands that this three-dimensional world means hellish existence, there is kind of this very impetus inside which urges him to really feel and live. But as soon as he comes into contact with the spiritual world, at least for the first time, as if the first thought of consciousness that it seems to have become better, that it is good, it stops him.
He doesn't need more.
Yes, meaning...
Consciousness always deceives, especially if a person gains the first experience of communication with the spiritual world, gains the first contact. That means, so to say, plenty of, well, such outbursts of feelings. You can't call them otherwise, right? This indeed affects consciousness too, because consciousness detects an enormous power. It is also a sort of euphoria for it, and it immediately tries to intercept. What does it try to intercept? It intercepts precisely the attention by starting to side with you, to play along. It immediately tries to explain all this, to intercept what the person has felt, and it will immediately substitute everything. And later on, it will cast doubt on this all. Well, and eventually it will start denying it and dictating its own stuff. But this happens only when a beast controls the angel. If the angel holds its ground, then no matter how much love this being generates and gets in response, this will still be insufficient for it, for as long as it is here, until it merges and becomes a part of that ocean. This is natural, this is simple. And the more a person, let's say, comes into contact with the spiritual world, the more often and more closely, the more consciousness tries to throw him out of this state, because it's lethal for it. It is aware of its doomed fate, while the process of survival, the instinct of survival, well, let's say, forces it to move.
There are also such mistakes while working on oneself as how to change one's life. For instance, people say, I'll start living with a clean slate.
This is impossible. We've talked about it more than once. When a person embarks on the path of service, he understands that the past has passed. And in the future, he undertakes to live in a new way, to live in service. And owing to this, once a long time ago, we've basically talked about this in one of the programs. Once a long time ago, they began to copy, to establish such monasteries and similar dwellings, to copy from truly spiritual people. People assume different names, they pray a lot, act a lot, but live by the same patterns. And they have supposedly changed something. Until a person overcomes his consciousness, nothing will change. It will play, wear mask of saints, but in fact, the person has remained with these problems just as before.
That is, he's searching precisely in the external.
In the external.
Meaning he wants to change his place of residence, he wants to resettle.
He wants to change everything, yeah?
To change, to alter, but thereby...
And then something will sort of change. Well, nothing will change. You won't escape from consciousness, since it's always with you.
Well, yes, but there are such fleeting emotions of joy, precisely emotions which are superficial, which are...
Right.
Consciousness is whispering that if you quickly...
That's what I've been talking about. Consciousness substitutes perception through feelings with high emotions.
Right.
With these emotional outbursts, yes, but it will immediately take them away and create sorrow for you. Why? Because you have fallen for it. Simply speaking, you have exchanged through perception, through feelings, for a bright emotion. You've invested the power of attention into a bright emotion, an outburst, into lightness of your body, meaning you've started living by the material. Hence you've become what? The beast. Well, that's it. While the beast has what is the beast's. If today it is rejoicing, tomorrow it will ignore you. And in order to avoid this, one should always be an angel and be above any matter. Then everything is simple. Just dictate.
Not to exchange the depth.
Whereas the simplest method is to listen to what your consciousness is telling you. It says, don't do this way, while you do. If you feel that it's the right thing to do, it tells you, you should be sad while you rejoice. Why should I be sad? Excuse me, if this beast, let's say, a dog, a chihuahua wants me to become sad, should I really be sad? Because of what the chihuahua in me desires, so that I resent you, for example. Well, what for? To provoke your chihuahua, and they will start barking at each other. But what does it have to do with us? Well, isn't that so? Well, it's okay if you have a chihuahua, but if you have a bear, poor my chihuahua, right?
Right. That's how it usually happens in life.
And that's what I'm also telling it. Why did I name it Chihuahua? Because this breed has no limits. It can attack a bear, an elephant, or anyone else just as easily, precisely as human consciousness does. It has no limits.
Yes, there's also another point. When people hear, people understand that someone somewhere is already able to do this. Someone has achieved some results in spiritual development, has overpowered his consciousness, or at least has restrained it. But how? Well, I won't be able to. It won't work out for me. So, disbelief.
Well, consciousness speaks exactly like this.
Something like the last drop. Well, I just don't believe.
But who disbelieves? It's consciousness that disbelieves. Who throws these doubts? All these are the games of consciousness. After all, it's exactly consciousness that will be telling you you won't succeed, that you're worthless. Don't engage in this. Don't waste your time.
Right. However, they're telling so much, but it's possible for them.
But these are saints. And who are you, right? Who are you? You're precisely an angel. You should simply understand who you are. You're alive or dead.
And he feels, he's already kind of ready, but consciousness still convinces him at some point that...
It must convince.
Yes, that it won't work out.
Well, right.
It is as if prompts to take the opposite side.
Yes.
If it has worked there, it won't work here.
Yes.
If one thing sort of sounds there, that means here it's the opposite a priori. Simply haven't believed it.
As if mutual exclusion happens. Meaning, if there is a plus, then I have a minus, and there is some sort of constant, two sides. That is, there is no single understanding, which is through feelings.
There is no single understanding, simply because consciousness always takes the side, which is, let's say, non-angelic one.
Yes.
While a person feels completely the different, that it's possible, that it's real. And while he, let's say, has doubts, while he's spiritually underdeveloped, such moments happen in him. But if such moments happen in a person already, I'll put it this way, it's already a certain part of the victory, because he's already identifying himself that, pardon me, he isn't a beast. Even if he feels like a gnawed chicken, a torn one, but it's already a bird, you see? Already with wings. Not an angel yet, a chicken, but not a beast anymore, already not a dog. Isn't it better? Whereas that one will grow up. Do you remember the fairy tale about the ugly duckling?
Yes.
What has become of it?
A beautiful swan.
That's the point. Well, how everyone was picking on him.
Pecking and oppressing.
That's the point. That's right.
After all, the system always aims to peg and repress a personality.
Oppress. To oppress.
Right, just to
offend, to oppress, to strike a vulnerable spot, pridefulness and everything else. But what does it end with if a person firmly stands on his path?
with the victory.
For sure. That's the point.
There is a question from people who are keeping diaries. Everything is good, meaning a person has already started keeping a diary. So he starts writing down thoughts. He says, well, it doesn't help. Well, there is still some sort of pressing. It's still hurting. And here's such a point. Well, here's something from observations, and the person himself has sort of shared this. That is, at some point he asked such a question that he was already sort of tracing and saw this mechanism which got activated for some reason. And it's got to the point that he actually made this diary in order to tell others how he was affected by consciousness, how it was manipulating him,
Right.
and to tell others about the mechanism.
A simple question. Has a person made a choice, and has he felt that he's not a beast? No, he hasn't. Who has made a choice? He has felt that this is real. He had this minute of awareness. But who got activated at this time? An animal. And it was precisely this inner animal that started this game. And he's playing it. And it wants to appear, but not to be.
A mask of a saint.
To appear a saint, right, but not to be one. And everything turns into a game. Is anything going to work out? No, it's not going to work out, because it was precisely the second component of the human, as a personality, the mortal one, that put him in the game and tricked him. Why? Because the person doesn't really seek God. He doesn't seek to realize who he is. That's the point.
He's got lost in the game.
Meaning he lives by an illusion. He likes this illusion. Why should I bother? What for? If all people live like this and so do I? Well, that's a simple directive coming from consciousness.
Igor Mikhailovich, could you somehow reveal this issue? What is the right way to write down one's own thoughts? Should one analyze them? What?
No, the analysis includes precisely, so there's a simple mechanism. When a thought comes to a person, to do something negative, something bright, but the person already realizes, when he is controlling his thoughts, he realizes that they are not his. He understands that they come to him. After all, he hasn't ordered a thought. For example, so that you say, take an offense at her. Well, for example, she has looked upon you not in the right way. Such a common trite phrase, right? You understand that it oppresses you, so you write it down. That today is the date, the time, and every day you've marked there. This thought came at 11:15. And that's it. And this thought will disappear as soon as you write it down. If you start to analyze why you have got such a thought, you activate the work of consciousness and run into a lie. And this chihuahua starts deceiving you right away and playing with you like with a puppet.
Something is wrong with you.
Surely.
It also sounds like a direct command.
Or something is wrong with her, right? But you are accurately writing down the thoughts which you haven't ordered. They don't come to you. You are busy with, for example, some computational processes. You add or deduct something. And here a thought comes to you that someone is wrong about you. I'm sorry, what is your consciousness occupied with? It squares some root out of nobody knows what. And suddenly a thought comes to you that someone treated you wrong. Why do you need it now? Why does your consciousness start manipulating you and making you worry about something instead of doing this math. Is it a freedom of thought? No, it's not. That's precisely what should be written down, you see? Because such a thought has come. Why has it come precisely at this moment? Because you have loosened this leash instead of making your consciousness work and keeping it on a tight leash. You see? And it's precisely in this moment, when you loosened it, that you were distracted by something and pay more attention not to, say, inner spiritual processes, but to the material. And your consciousness gained a certain degree of freedom, and it immediately started deluging you with rubbish. That's a simple example. It's like when, so to say, an antivirus is installed on a computer. As soon as it has become weaker, they immediately start deluging the computer with rubbish, right? Well, this is really so.
Right. There is also such a wrong understanding that when a person starts being engaged in the spiritual, then he starts blaming for all his troubles, actually for everything bad that is happening to him, precisely the fact that he starts being engaged in the spiritual.
Well, I'll say like this. If a person starts being engaged in the spiritual, then he is right in blaming himself. One should live by the spiritual, whereas you can engage in sports or something else. But if he engages in the spiritual, it is the consciousness that engages. Classifying it as engagement already predicts a temporary hobby. You can be temporarily keen on life. Of course, consciousness will play if there is such a directive, and the person doesn't lie when he's writing about this. He says, I've got engaged in spiritual development. Even with this phrase, not knowing the person, not listening to anything, consciousness has started a game with him. Why? Because a person has had a spiritual search. He has experienced this need for freedom and love, and he has felt that it's possible. He has felt that he is not an animal. He has felt that he is something greater, that indeed there is a part of the spiritual world within him, and he can become this component of the boundless world. At the same time, consciousness has reacted. It has immediately loaded him with emotions, has loaded him with everything, has given him practices which are mostly coming from consciousness. That is, he has taken not a pure tool. Even if the tool is pure, what's the difference? It has given him the tool, it has given him everything, and immediately has blamed him for everything. Right away, it has distracted and said, well, you have engaged in the spiritual, and look, you have lost there, there, and there. Here are the losses this has cost you, and what have you got? Excuse me, what can you get from spiritual freedom in the material world? A simple question.
And what have you expected?
Is it the lamp of Aladdin? Whereas if you begin to live, then with every step you gain more life, more love, more happiness, more understanding. There is more understanding of the illusion of this material world, of the dictatorship through your consciousness from whose dictatorship? Satan's, right? Who we call Satan in religion and everywhere. And you will understand that you are dual, that there is both a part of God and a part of Satan within you. There is an alive part and there is a mortal part. And to expect from consciousness that someday your body would emerge again, right? Well, it's been told about this very well precisely in the Atlantis video. All these are fairy tales. Never. What has been destroyed is destroyed. Like I say, the first thing that the spiritual path begins with is the control of thoughts. Don't accept anything bad, and you'll be given what's good. Don't accept bad advices, don't accept annoyance, don't accept hatred. Everything that oppresses you, don't accept bad mood. Everything comes from egoism. People say depression, yet what is depression? The highest form of egoism. We've discussed it more than once.
Inaction.
Inaction, sure. And ego. Why would you lie on a couch, moan and whine that you feel bad? Well, you like it, meaning you enjoy it if you live by this. Well, don't you?
Yes, it reminds me when you were saying...
Just stop caring about your chihuahua and begin to love people. They're angelic components. It's impossible to love an animal. You can play, respect, but you're not a beast if you have realized that you're alive.
Right. It's like this case. How can I return this inspiration? Here I'm waking up.
If this question is coming from consciousness, then you can't.
Right.
Again, do you need inspiration or emotion which follow that? That's all.
Right, that's all.
There is also a frequent situation, after catharsis or some problems in life, a person is asking himself how to return into the feeling, and he is searching for some specific solution for a specific situation.
Certainly.
Please answer me.
And he is searching by consciousness.
Yes, at least.
Right? How can I acquire it? Excuse me, you can acquire new socks or a cap. This you can. Right.
A new answer, yes, a new path.
Yet how is it possible to gain life? In no way just work. You should simply live.
Consciousness is not satisfied with the already available answer, meaning this question is already like...
It wants something new.
It wants something new, wants something especially for me. Maybe this doesn't apply to me. This very theme that after all I'm different compared to that person, we're different.
Of course, different, right.
This very situation for him is good, but in my case something else is probably needed.
But in my specific case, because my life is the most complicated one.
Right, I have the biggest difficulties.
Yet it oppresses me so much, but I'm so spiritually strong that I'm even afraid of harming people, you know? Well...
Therefore, I will probably do nothing.
Of course, I'll remain a dog. Well, if you want to live as a dog, just live. Who hinders you? Nobody minds.
One shouldn't look for some new solutions, new ways, when in all situations, the way of returning back to feelings is always the same.
The choice.
The choice of love.
Simply the choice. And we've again come back to what? To the tried choice. The choice in love. Choose love and you'll be happy. Whereas if you're unhappy, this means, pardon me, that you're a dog. Well, isn't it so?
It is.
Well, in other words, no matter how you twist it, if you're in grief, in misfortune, in self-torment, if thoughts torture and prey upon you, this means you like it. This means you're part of the animal world. You're financing this. Live like this. May you feel good if you like this. If you criticize everyone, if you are the only one of a kind in this world, well, you enjoy being like this. Well, it's your choice. Let's assume, why should we, let's say, worry about this person or try to make something out of him? Well, what for?
And what is true freedom, after all?
True freedom, it is life. It is love. It is God's love. This is indeed freedom. It is freedom from the dictatorship of Chihuahua or an elephant, well, whoever has what, is already life, because a person feels life.
How can a person understand this?
How can he understand? He should come to this, really begin to live.
Meaning, if he is still hesitating, am I happy or unhappy?
This is consciousness.
If he asks himself questions.
If these questions are coming, I am happy or unhappy, then he is unhappy. Well, there can be no questions from personality. Personality either lives or doesn't live, right? Either it's in slavery or it is in freedom. Yes, one should fight for freedom. Yes, one should surmount a hard way. Rejecting everything bad is already opposition. It's already defense of the angel. When you choose good, when you choose love and perception through feelings, when you choose life, or you just choose positivity, everything begins with positivity, in fact. Consciousness says everything's bad, but you say, I don't want to have such a thought. I want to see good things, you see. Well, I want everything to be good. It says, how can you see good things? Just look, it's bad everywhere. Okay, I'll turn around and look at the good. And consciousness says, well, it's bad there too. Well, for you it's bad, but for me it's good here. For me the sky is blue. Excuse me.
But how can I?
What is this color at all? Well, the tablet cloth is of this color. Well, there's nothing bad here. It's pretty. Well, isn't it?
It is.
What's bad here? Life itself, the very process of living, even of living in a body, in matter, it also brings enormous joy. It brings joy in the sense that you understand that it is temporary. You see? This is already wonderful, already splendid, and in the sense that there is something greater further and you can gain it. Well, you have already gained it if you've realized it. This is already a lot. While consciousness will pester all the time through the way, well, it's consciousness. It's a mediator between the mortal world and the living world. I mean, between an angel and a beast. Well, how can it be otherwise?
How can one communicate with people for whom everything's bad?
Let's say there are no people for whom everything's bad. It's bad for their animals. Well, you just communicate with the angel. If you are forced to communicate with an animal at work or in everyday life, well, communicate. But you do understand to whom you are talking. It's the system, it's the beast. Well, now it is commanding the plucked chicken. What can you do? Well, you feel sorry for the chicken, yes? If you can help, just help. If not, then keep quiet, for this is its choice.
Igor Mikhailovich, and when the dialogue is going on at this moment, while two consciousnesses communicate of personality and personality at the level of feelings, how is it awakened?
Wait, the dialogue when two consciousnesses communicate of personality and personality.
Well, consciousnesses are communicating on their own.
Right now, at this very moment, while we were clarifying your question, who were communicating in us? Consciousness and consciousness, right? Why? Because we were trying to paraphrase or to understand your phrases. This is normal.
It's one side.
They listen, understand, analyze. But there's another perception, through feelings. It speaks about other things. And precisely this inner dialogue had nothing to do with our today's conversation for some reason. But that's not the point. One doesn't hinder the other, isn't it so? It is. How can we tell this to people who don't know this? But what do they need this for? Here's a simple question. Why would we tell a kid who's going to the first grade, for example, what a neutrino consists of, right? If many people still don't know what a neutrino actually is. And we'll tell what it is to a child who's going to the first grade, who, pardon me, still poorly knows the alphabet. What for? If he needs it, he'll find it, study, and learn it.
But perhaps his personality will just echo faster.
Not the personality. It is consciousness that will be interested in this as magic. You see, there will be nothing interesting. Well, magic does attract some superheroes, super abilities. There are not any super abilities and superheroism. All those are fairy tales. That which manifests itself as a side effect, well, is unacceptable for this three-dimensionality, but it is absolutely acceptable there, in life. One thing doesn't hinder the other.
Regarding the development of a personality, we've kind of touched upon these issues, but the fact that a person thinks that he develops a personality and does something, learns languages, studies something, engages in...
That's right, I'll put it this way, it's wonderful.
Yes.
If a person thinks that he's developing as a personality, the concept of personality is distorted in general understanding. The angelic component, meaning the human being, is the personality, while the animal component is his mortal consciousness. This is a clear, simple understanding, black and white. There's no other, no third, no gray. But in ordinary human understanding, when everything takes place under the dictation of consciousness, then personality is perceived exactly as consciousness, that which the superficial I, whom a personality allegedly perceives himself as, right? And by developing myself as a personality, this implies developing myself as a chihuahua. I will be able to grow up, let's say, into some bigger animal, into Pekingese, for instance, you see, for it's a couple of kilograms heavier. Well, that's what I learn languages means. The fact that consciousness is learning languages is wonderful. It must do this, but everything should occur a little differently. If for your job you need to learn Chinese, English, French, doesn't matter, meaning another language, it is very easy to do this. You as a personality give the order and it fulfills it. When it starts whining and not doing, you stop feeding it. That is, you decrease the supply of the power of attention, and it starts working with great pleasure. Just like a hungry cat starts eating onions, yes? In the same way it starts learning Chinese. Everything's very simple. Why? Because it is necessary for your job. Since it's necessary, make it learn. Your consciousness mustn't have a free time. It must execute what is necessary. Well, some people may say, and what about creative processes? This is wonderful, splendid, just splendid. It's just the same with any creative work. If there were no these techniques, we wouldn't know about Bartini, Tesla. I can list the names for a very, very long time. These are the people who possess primary skills. By the way, those two men, we once told about them, they studied those very techniques almost at the same institution in childhood. If they hadn't learned that, but unfortunately they choose the material and not the spiritual, but if they hadn't known that, they wouldn't have become those whom they've become. And generally speaking, they were actually moving this evolution very fast, along revolutionary ways, so to say.
Right.
But it would be better if they'd become spiritually strong.
Spiritually developed.
Of course.
It's much more valuable, and moreover, it's for eternity.
Then technically.
That's the regaining of life.
Well, this is a wonderful example, exactly as an answer to those who say, but what about creativity? That's how creativity is done. Consciousness works within the boundaries it needs, but it mustn't dictate you as a personality. what you should experience, what you should do, what you should perceive and not perceive, who you should be offended at, or look askance at, and so on.
There is a question about action and inaction. That is when consciousness attacks personality, and personality at this moment is sort of, well, the person doesn't understand that he's a personality and starts doing nothing in terms of accepting this attack, accepting what is imposed.
But then there's no attack. I understand that people are asking questions and you are retelling them, but they are confused here. A person who is unaware of himself as a personality cannot experience attacks from the animal. You see? Consciousness starts to divide, to single out one mental part of its thinking processes as a certain personality. It forms one of its small I and begins to defend it. These are games of the actors in your consciousness. One puts on the mask of your personality, the other puts on that of a fierce beast.
Like a bad and a good actor.
And they start performing in front of you, yes? And when you observe this process, you understand. Here is a simple example for people how to distinguish this game. You do see the two actors performing in your head. You are the one sitting in the audience, exactly, you're the personality. It's just the same consciousness in you. It easily splits itself, just as a picture in the computer, right? That is, it can be divided into as many pieces as you like. And the same way consciousness divides itself into anything and simply, to put it politely, deceives you.
Well, yes, there is still such a question here. How should I, if I'm a personality, how should I react?
To what?
Meaning, how should I act when I get...
Simply forbid it to engage in nonsense. First of all, as a personality, or in order to understand a personality.
What's exactly this action of the personality?
The action of the personality is exactly at this moment to make thoughts about something beautiful, something wonderful come, about the fact that the neighbor, oh, you have dark eyes, so has beautiful dark eyes. What else do we have? Here are beautiful dresses. Look, what a beautiful color, both of them, right? It's a real harmonious, beautiful color, simply to satiate yourself with this, to enjoy, to experience a feeling of joy and love, and that's all. You see, it says, how can it be all? And that's all. You see?
And what about this thing and that thing and the other thing?
And that's a question from consciousness. And what about this and that? Confine it to this. And you'll understand how it stalled and how it started wagging its tail. And it turns out it's not personality, and it turns out it's not consciousness and not you, and you are whatever. But if you listen to this tale, it will start controlling you. Everything is simple. Just stop it strictly, clearly, and remain on the position of everything beautiful, happy and good. But you know that meanwhile you need to do this, this and this, for example, to go to a store, well, and to build a couple of floors of a building, if you're a builder, for instance. So you go to the store, build a couple of floors of the building, and you admire the beauty of that same stone, for example, of which you're laying the building. Well, why not?
What you need to do for your family, for some kind of your accommodation.
You come to your family and rejoice at what your family is like.
Yes, but this doesn't hinder.
Even if they all hate you, they want to beat you. These are their bees who want to bite you. And as people, they suffer. It's clear that you cannot help them. You should not force them to study what you practice yourself, right? You shouldn't. This is the freedom of choice, and you cannot impose your own, but you can understand them. You can sympathize by choosing your behavior correctly, so as not to annoy their animals. Why tease dogs? You'll be less bitten this way.
Besides, quite a considerable percentage of where human attention goes is that people are worried and concerned about their future all the time.
You shouldn't worry about it. You should start living now, and then you'll understand that you don't have a future. You have an infinite and boundless life in the spiritual world, whereas material future will end already tomorrow. Today you have it, and tomorrow you don't have it anymore. And when a person understands this, he stops doing stupid things, while simple planning, like again, to build a house, to do this and that, even to choose a grave for your body at a cemetery, well, this is a natural process, you see, and it doesn't interfere with life in any way. Well, what kind of making plans is this? This is banal distribution of, let's say, time that maybe is left for you, of your stay or imprisonment of you as a living being in this dead organism, and in this dead world, inevitably dead. And the fact that it is dead, well, pardon me, we've said this more than once. After all, there are particles of worlds, planets, and all kinds of things in you. And so you will become particles of other people, of all kinds of insects, bugs, including chihuahuas and whoever else. Well, isn't this right? It is.
The most interesting thing is that every person knows what is needed for the happy future, that it is beyond the limits of matter.
But consciousness prevents them from grasping this. This is the trouble. Why? Because people live by the wrong things. It's elementary, simple knowledge, which was available to entire humanity, which people used to live by, not so long ago, before statehood emerged. It was available to people. That's why Allatra, this very sign, was present all over the world. Now we're sitting and telling about this, you see, about simple elementary things which everyone should live by, which should be, well, a human being must do this. This is life. But this is unacceptable today for very many people. Why? Because consciousness forbids them.
There is a habit of living by consciousness which can be changed.
It's not a habit of living by consciousness, it's a lack of knowledge that there is life. People believe in everything they like, that they will utter certain rituals, do something, and they will be rewarded. Someday something will come. And consciousness forces them to believe in this nonsense, but at the same time not to work on themselves. And in no way to control their consciousness, meaning the power of consciousness, dictatorship of the dead over the alive.
There is also a widespread question, where's this button, which one should press within oneself?
The button exists. I'll repeat once again, and it is very simple. This button is called attention. While distribution of attention is exactly pressing on the button, it says it's bad, but you say, I don't want bad, may everything be good.
And that it may be retained.
That's all. Consciousness tells you, even together with your doctor, that you will die tomorrow, while you have such a diagnosis. There is a fuss here, or there is humility, or something else, but you can say, well, it's you who will die. Tomorrow? Good.
It's closer.
Whereas I will start living today, you see, a simple technique. There is no simpler tool. And as you've said, one should start living here, now and right now, and just live. It's clear that it's necessary to get to life itself. Personality should
Develop.
get stronger, develop, and you should. It takes certain time, effort. But if this is your choice, then you should live. While if you're engaged in the process of spiritual development, well, then you can do it your whole life, right? Everything is simple.
Also, there is such a question. A person cannot forgive himself, meaning something happened in his life.
No.
That is, regarding lost
No.
opportunities.
That's not true. These are all games of consciousness. A person can't forgive something, he can't do something else. You see, all these are forms of egoism, all these are games of consciousness of this chihuahua. What difference does it make to me whether it turned with its tail, with its face, lay on its side, on its back? All these are games of the animal. You either live, and then everything is wonderful, or you don't live, and then you have a lot of problems. You can't forgive yourself, you can't forgive someone. Who cannot forgive? Who's playing? Consciousness is playing. The animal is playing. It gives value to the past, depriving you of the future. Well, if you want to exist like this, then exist. That's your choice. After all, it's your chihuahua that commands you.
Right. It's just that people often get fixed on their problem, which haunts them.
No, they're not fixated on anything. These are banal programs that work and eat their lives. And at this time, excuse me, they like tomatoes ripen for someone to eat them. Well, isn't it so?
It is.
And what for? This is a simple, banal lack of understanding. I'll say it once again. This is a lack of knowledge of elementary things, elementary truths, which, by the way, are set forth in all religions, but nobody interprets them. Why? Because they don't know, have lost and forgotten them. Because, well, that's how we've changed the world to what we have now. And an example of this is, again, if we look globally at the world, well, it's really unpleasant and creepy. At the time when we should unite, sit together and think, realizing that in the near future there will be not that plenty of space and territories, and we'll have to survive somehow, to develop technologies, and we should consolidate in the world and as one united family. Now we are being divided more and more, right? And we perceive this as normal, as natural, because in the future, will there be problems or won't be any? Well, it's not a big deal that the climate will change. So what? So far it's good. And when it changes completely, well, we'll come up with something, we'll live. No, you won't be able to solve anything then. That's the way it will be. Well, isn't that right?
It is. The system postpones everything for later, while at this moment it itself...
Well, why have I given this macro example? On both the micro and macro scales, everything is fractal. The system works according to predefined patterns. Do you think anyone in Atlantis believed they would perish? Or didn't they know about it? Everything started to collapse exactly the same way, and until they were completely washed away, only a small number of people could choose a normal, let's say, existence. Well, let's say to stay alive, right? In a normal existence, to become alive, to be more exact. However, some, having preserved the knowledge, tried to hide. Well, that's okay. They survived, conveyed the knowledge from those times to Sumer, you see, and until now it dictates. Atlantis is an interesting video, it makes people think. It's for the smart ones.
Right.
Very many people are also stressed and worried about how they can feel life inside, freedom within themselves. How can we...
You see, if we sit, worry and think about how we can do this, we won't do this. Just imagine a baby was born, and he's lying in his bed, and it starts thinking, how will I walk? Well, after all, I can fall, stumble over something, and this way 10 years, 20 years, 50 years pass, while he's still lying and thinking. Then he dies, they've carried him away and buried, and that's it. That's how everything has ended. But thank God his brain has no time to develop to such an extent that he would start thinking like this. He just stands up and runs. So be like children, stand up and go. That's the understanding. And don't think, how can I do this? A simple example, the simple button we've talked about is attention. Consciousness says, how is it? But why would I talk to a dog about this at all, when this relates to the issues of life? Well, isn't it so?
It is. After all, when, for instance, I don't know, a house is burning, a person doesn't even think whether he can run or he cannot run from the burning house, right?
He just jumps out, and the faster the better.
Such a focus on the goal.
Correct. And here one should sometimes follow the example even of an animal. And one should even follow the example of one's own dog on how will it save its body and its life jumping out of the burning house. Just in the same way you should jump aside from the dictatorship of consciousness. Are there any more questions?
Could you please clarify? You've just said that if consciousness doesn't do what you need, then you should stop giving it attention. What does it imply? Could you clarify?
Attention in what? Well, I've just answered.
How is it to stop giving it attention?
Well, for example, you need some solution, and let's take to invent a new engine. So it must be busy with inventing a new engine. Clearly, consciousness must control all vital processes and the like. But as soon as aggression comes from it, you begin to think as much as possible. I emphasize to think and to admit only those thoughts which relate to beauty, happiness, joy, and everything else, and nothing more. And you also leave a part of financing for the invention of that engine, or for calculation of something, or for learning some language. And that's all. This is very simple. It's just denial and non-perception of what it imposes on you. No matter what it imposes on you, it will be telling you, if you don't stand up right now, you'll die. You know how it is. If you don't realize that you're alive, then you will die for sure. Therefore, start living, then you won't die. But if you listen to consciousness, you'll surely die.
But at the same time, dealing even with some projects, when consciousness is loaded...
It must be loaded and it must work. And the more it is loaded, the less you as a personality are loaded. But after all, at such moments, it doesn't catch you on implementation on projects or on something else, on execution of work. No, it catches you on your self-evaluation, on the fact that someone's bad by palming of negativity. Let's take even implementation of some joint projects. Some people are good, they do something, while others don't do. There should be understanding, but not judgment. And once it begins to judge, tighten the leash right away. Everything is great and wonderful, and you're doing this and that. If it has too little work, force it to learn a language which you don't know, and then it will understand that it's better not to play around, because it is fed with such number of calories, while being forced to do much more work. Trust me, it calculates very well.
That is, while performing this, consciousness is performing this action. But again, going back to those 90% of attention, meaning you don't just load it, but this very moment...
You invest 90% of attention in your spiritual development, namely in love and in communication. in feeling of the spiritual world and feeling of angels around, meaning the angelic nature in people. Even if, like I say, this little angel is in the state of a chicken plucked by a chihuahua, but this being is there, everyone has it, there's hope. And so, that's what is important, you see. While 10% of the power of attention is more than enough for you to keep consciousness loaded 24 hours a day with 10,000 projects simultaneously. Well, I've blurred this small number simply out of thin air. 10,000, maybe more, you see. And it will cope with everything, because it has no choice. But if it begins to throw in something bad and tries to dominate, to dictate, this means the amount of attention should be decreased, and you should reside in relations with the spiritual world even more. And everything works out then. This is very simple indeed. Well, let's say when it works out, you do understand this. But when you get confused, when it distracts you, hear consciousness, and why? I'm answering once again. Everything is very simple. It has diverted you to something. You have lost freedom, precisely spiritual freedom, and invested the power of attention in your consciousness in the improper way, in greater amount than needed, and it has immediately seized you and it begins to manipulate you. And all your projects will immediately stop, because you're preoccupied only with yourself, only with thinking over how poor and miserable you are, and how can you do nothing and won't be able to do anything, and you're engaging in nonsense, and generally speaking, you should just go and, I don't know, clean the floor, for you're capable of nothing more. It's not shameful to clean the floor. And since consciousness has proposed this, you lift it by its ear and force it to clean the floor in addition to doing everything else. And the next time, it won't throw in such jokes. Everything falls into place.
Well, yes, it happens so in life that when you really begin to, well, everything comes down to human pride. But if...
Do you know what the trouble is? The trouble is that people treat consciousness as something alive.
Right.
While it's not alive, it's a program, and it's an artful program, written by a very clever and competent programmer, yes? It creates semblance, an illusion of the alive for everyone, and it replaces and substitutes everything. And a person perceives this as an integral part of oneself, as oneself,
Yes.
and as something alive. But it's not alive, it's a program.
Hence, there is pity exactly for the system.
Pity for oneself,
For oneself, yes, but...
as for a part of the system, simply because identification goes in this direction. Well, that's how it happens. But again, it's a security program, and it must be. And I'll put it simpler. Thanks to such programs, well, say, an immature being cannot come to the spiritual world, you see. If such program worked here in three-dimensionality and an immature fruit didn't fall from a tree, well, it would be great. There would be fewer Newtons in this world.
The first step, if a person who hasn't yet come into contact, but he wants to, he understands that there is something here, how can he feel it? I've remembered the lotus flower practice from Sensei of Shambhala book first, and precisely its essence when, after all, everyone experienced such moments of sincere happiness in his or her life, even not expecting this, and that you like save it in such a piggy bank. At some point you pay attention exactly to them and even start giving back. That is not just to feel them, but you already as if share this. And I've also remembered that in the Universal Grain video, one of the girls, a participant when public survey was conducted, she answered that a person should have personal time for God. And here is the question, meaning how important it is that a person who really wants to would allocate this time in order to simply reinforce this component of feelings.
Well, it's a must.
With his attention, even by means of memories as a starting point, like having remembered those moments.
Here we take banal tools, right? After all, what is the lotus flower spiritual practice? At the initial stage, it's merely, let's say, a work at the level of consciousness, but well-funded with attention, right? But which is tuned for good, for positivity. After all, no matter how paradoxical it sounds, most people don't even know what love is, you see? It all comes down to power, to manipulation, and to some kind of emotions against the background of hormonal surges. That's the whole understanding of love. Or it comes down to attachment, to submission, basically a complete perversion. But all this is at the level of the three-dimensional plane, let's put it so. And precisely for this, we need such tools as the primary lotus flower. After all, the lotus flower spiritual practice begins with a banal, sort of autogenic training and ends with spiritual practice. It is boundless. And I emphasize that the life of a modern human won't allow reaching the depth of full understanding of this spiritual practice. Why? There isn't enough time. And a person, no matter how talented he or she is, in fact, won't be able to fully discover the lotus flower as a spiritual practice. But it gives a good understanding. This is the easiest and the simplest tool that answers many questions. And you have basically answered them yourself. Of course, a person should allocate time when he is in a fuss, but he feels that there is something. He must devote personal time to spiritual practices. He must perform them. Well, how can it be otherwise? In order to settle down one's consciousness a little, to think, in order to choose, say, positivity, not negativity, one must stop in the course of everyday life. Well, life hurries him up, while he simply needs time, even to set an alarm clock at least 5 or 10 times a day. Who are you and what are you doing now? And here to think about something beautiful. Here are simple techniques that lead to the understanding that you are a personality, that you possess a certain degree of freedom, that you can understand something. Well, it's a must. How can it be otherwise? On the simplest path, right?
If there is a goal, then he will do everything to achieve it.
But you see, another trouble is that we often talk and give global answers, and we talk at the level of what people feel and understand. We are missing a lot of such simple, elementary things. And for people, this is already a misunderstanding. How? Why? Because we perceive, well, that people must feel. In fact, they do feel. They feel everything, but consciousness hinders them. Even, pardon me, the smallest chicken, plucked and nibbled by these chihuahuas, by a whole pack, it still feels. After all, we are one family. We all come from one power. Is the power emanating from the spiritual world, from the soul? This power precisely begets a personality. Well, it all interacts with each other, and the connection here is huge, it is strong. But we cannot, until we realize that we are a personality, until we develop, we cannot feel all this. Consciousness is active, this world is like this. It all is arranged this way, it closes. And in order for people to start feeling each other, they must become free. And when this state of freedom comes, then yes, everything will be easy to feel. Then we can communicate on completely abstract topics while our consciousness is engaged in chatter. You see, that is, in this respect. In the literal sense of chatter, but in attempt to bring at least a little bit of meaning into this chatter for helping others. Unfortunately, it's not so easy for people to achieve this degree. And again, that perception through feelings is replaced by consciousness with telepathy for some reason, meaning I should hear thoughts. Well, there can be such a side effect, but what for? Well, believe me, you'll hear nothing good. There are people who dream, so to say, of hearing thoughts. Guys, this is the greatest curse possible. You can't imagine how much dirt you will hear, including that about yourself. There is nothing good in this. What do you need this happiness for, this load? In order to build an empire to dictate to someone? Come on. The first thought you will hear will be that you won't succeed in doing anything, in dictating to anyone.
Like you said, in order to hear thoughts, just listen to your own thoughts.
Right, listen to your own thoughts.
What does it want, right?
Is it really you who wants?
The simplest way to possess, right, to learn telepathy, is to listen to your own thoughts.
There will be a million times more of these negative, absurd thoughts, which will hinder even more.
Yes, well, everything starts with this. It's really so.
As you've said, a person will understand that they are not him because inside he has something completely different. That is, how can this be him when he feels something entirely different inside, and when internally he strives for something totally different?
Yes, but consciousness talks about something completely different. People say that a good psychiatrist would make a diagnosis here, whereas an honest psychiatrist would understand you because he is absolutely the same. Well,
He would tell you, don't worry, my friend.
you're normal, yes?
You are normal.
There is simply such a substitution that a person wants to know what the other person thinks instead of listening attentively to what he's feeling right now.
No, or instead of listening attentively attentively to what you yourself are thinking right now. I'm sorry, it's also not that simple for a person just to offhand start listening attentively to what he thinks, to what thoughts are sent to him, and to sort this out. Well, this is what we were talking about, notebooks, records, and all the rest. These are the first steps which a person should take. Firstly, to learn to think about what's good, brushing aside negative thoughts and writing down those negative and obsessive thoughts, which try to make their way through. What for? After all, consciousness does nothing without a reason. It's a program, it's an algorithm, which is written in your life. They say it's fate. Guys, what fate? Well, you're creating your fate yourselves. If today you've accepted a negative thought that your neighbor, let's say, looked askance at you and you should revenge him, this scoundrel, for example by taking a dog for a walk to poop under his gate, right? Then believe me, it'll have an entire cycle of consequences. Eventually you won't come to anything good if you made consciousness to consciousness and started acting negatively under its dictation.
And may I also, people just have such a question, and I often hear it from people, there is such a substitution in consciousness that happiness cannot be permanent, meaning that happiness is just some moments. You can hear this in particular from older people. They say, yes, there is happiness, but it's just some moments, outbursts.
The dead are saying this, pardon me.
But how can a person...
Happiness cannot be temporary. I'm saying once again, love cannot be temporary, freedom cannot be temporary. These are the components of one process, which is called life, right? Life must be eternal. Life cannot be temporary. This is... Once I gave this example already, but I'll repeat. People say, "Doctor, thank you, you saved me." How did I save you? You were ill, and I healed you, right? Firstly, did I heal you? I gave you a pill, or I gave you an injection. After that, it's not my problem already how chemistry worked, meaning your body. I saved you. What did I save you from? Does it mean you won't die? Well, not today, right? Today you won't die, but you'll die tomorrow. I've not saved you, after all. In fact, a person must save himself. You see, this cannot be temporary. This emotion, when they have achieved something, when they have received something, people call happiness. Well, you were walking and found $2 lying on the ground. Such a happiness. You see, such an emotional outburst. You found $2. Well, after a while you get upset because you had found so little.
This also happens because of, well, consciousness says, don't prevent me from grieving.
Yeah.
Why will I? Well, what does it mean to be happy? To be happy is preciously...
To be happy is foolishness, while pleasure is grief, right?
Right, here is such a stupid
Self-torture, for example. Here I am,
yes? These are very common situations when people...
And many talk about this.
Yes, many people talk about this.
Well, this is again like that very wailing near the wall, which we analyzed in the previous program.
Yeah.
It's that oppression which consciousness imposes on people, and people live by this. Well, if they live by this, if they like it, this self-torment, this masochism, so who's enjoying it in a person? The system is enjoying. And it is happy because it seizes your attention completely. Because from you, pardon me, a fool, from a potentially alive, it is making an inevitably dead. Because it creates the future for itself, you see? After all, it will live after your physical death of your body, right? Consciousness will exist as a program and again parasitize on your personality. Well, of course, for this program, it is very convenient and it does everything in order to make it happen. But why does a person submit to this? Why does a person say, as a personality, after all, he does feel that something is wrong and understands that it shouldn't be so.
He does feel.
But keeps doing it. Well, here, of course, it's...
After all, very many people, there is even a common situation when they just wake up in the morning, see their totally lifeless look, and don't understand what all this for, why they, for instance, go somewhere. That is, kind of complete, well...
Indifference to life.
Indifference to life.
Some kind of apathy.
And they don't understand what all this for.
It's also interesting when they start trying to get even with life, as they say, right? That is, we are touching upon suicides. Well, since life is so wild, why do I need it? As if they are going to feel better afterwards. Well, this is total nonsense.
This is the key point, that every person, having asked oneself such a question, precisely feels that, well, like...
This is not a solution to the problem.
And feels that he's capable of and needed here for a lot more. And even in childhood, every one of us understood and felt that adults were fussing and sort of making themselves busy with some foolishness. Don't do this, don't do that. But after all, well...
Well, now you're touching upon a very interesting point that indeed, very many people are actually capable of quite a lot. In fact, certain situations develop. And if a person, let's say, doesn't go to the right, under the dictation of the system, but turns left instead, then he might get, let's say, that understanding which would make him free. And having become at least a little bit free, he can serve the spiritual world in this three-dimensionality and give immense freedom to other people, you see? Whereas the system, feeling and understanding these little steps, or feeling the power of his personality, is immediately trying to load him. Feeling his inner potential, it imposes on him a lot more pressure than on the other one, and the person burns himself out, while continuing to feel throughout his life that he can throw this load off. Nonetheless, often these people get broken, become alcoholics, drug addicts, suicides, and the like. But once they were potentially spiritually strong, that is, had a greater degree of freedom,
Meaning,
well, this is...
if a person at that moment made the right choice, preciously listened to his feelings, this would lead to global positive consequences.
Well, not quite global, but,
Well, at least...
let's say, he would cause significant damage to the system.
Right, at least damage.
He would inflict damage, you see.
Yes, yes.
And I'll put it simply, the system perceives such people as a virus for its flock, you see? Just like a farmer reacts to a virus at the neighboring farm, right? That animals there have fallen ill, and he immediately deliberately quarantines them. Well, in order for another flock not to get ill, it's better to block the potential threat as much as possible. And when people embark on the spiritual path and begin to study all these processes carefully, to approach this seriously, when they begin to work on, let's say, opposing the system itself within themselves, what do they face? They face aggression from the system itself. And quite often, if a person approaches the attainment of life mindlessly, then the system breaks him. Why?
It takes revenge.
It takes revenge, right?
And immediately, he has barely felt something good.
But
when...
this, on the contrary, is good. When a person approaches this process with due knowledge, he understands that if aggression has started from the system, it means this is good.
It means he's doing the right thing.
Certainly. These are like signs on the road that indicate you're following the right path, fellow. Strengthen your walk.
People also think that in order to unite with God, one must constantly remain in spiritual practice. Therefore, naturally, there is no time.
Well, what people put into the concept of spiritual practice, this should continue from birth to death of the physical body. It's an ongoing process. It is also called a dynamic meditation and the like. There must be a permanent contact. The spiritual practice should always go on. That's in human understanding. If you at least slightly lose this joy, love, well, it means that the system will command you. Immediately consciousness has attacked you, brought you into a maze and confused you, hasn't it?
Meaning the fact that the dynamic practice doesn't work at once, as consciousness tells you.
Well, of course not at once. It can be at once, but consciousness immediately begins to oppress. You see, you're not succeeding. It means you're nothing and no one, and it won't work out. Either the practice is wrong or you're wrong. And here one of the two is guilty, either Mr. Geppetto or Pinocchio, right? In fact, neither Mr. Geppetto nor Pinocchio have anything to do with the circus in your head. It belongs to you alone. And you just need to work harder, to work indeed. If you work honestly, everything will work out. You do feel, don't you? Yes, you do. What else do you need, right? Simply develop this. Most importantly, remove doubts. Don't listen to consciousness. It tells you it's bad, you won't succeed, and you say, why won't I succeed if you already are raged, right? Well, even if we approach this logically, since consciousness opposes, this means you are already gaining strength. If it criticizes you, then you're already gaining something. Well, isn't that so? Well, it is. Therefore, it's necessary to practice, it's necessary to understand.
Is there anything at all that can prevent a human being from being free? Well, I mean, really.
Yes, there is. In actual fact, the state of subpersonality totally eliminates spiritual development, while personality remains active, with active self-awareness. It is dead. Well, it's what people understand by this notion. It's the only thing that can hinder. But for as long as a person lives here, and while by all laws he possesses the right to distribute the power of attention, he really can. He can get liberated and start living. There's nothing else. No prohibition, nothing else. Nobody can hinder him.
When a person is working on himself for a long time and believes consciousness which says that he has no results, then...
This means he's not working on himself. You see, there are also mutually exclusive points here. That is, you're saying a person is working on himself for a long time and believes consciousness which tells him, pardon me, what is he doing while working on himself? He precisely agrees with his consciousness, and is he engaging in self-torture or in spiritual development? Here's a simple question. What is he engaging in? He's engaging in masochism. He's not engaging in spiritual development. After all, the spiritual path is very easy. It is pleasant, it is joyful. The first thing you start generating is joy and love. While residing in joy and love, how can you listen to anybody saying that you don't manage? Don't manage what? Don't manage to love? Who doesn't manage to love?
People mostly have fear that they won't have time to get saved.
It is the system having fear that it won't be able to get saved if you evolve spiritually. It must impose this, but why should you listen to it? And how can a person who has stepped on the spiritual path have either fear or anxiety or hatred or doubts? All these are processes of consciousness. There should be a clear differentiation here. And generally speaking, any thought which is imposed and is coming, after all, is not perception through feelings. It's conscious perception in the form of a transmitted thought, right? It's already 100% doubtful, because it is coming from whom? From consciousness. What is consciousness? It's a program, not just a little program, but a part of an entire huge program. Understanding, knowing all this, and it's very easy to learn and to find confirmations. Just take a notebook and write everything down. We've already talked about this 1,000 times, and anyone, even excuse me, the most inveterate skeptic or super atheist, I don't know what else to call him. Just any person who doubts everything with the activeness of consciousness, but who has a real interest and thirst for knowledge, really. He can experiment, and he will get convinced that consciousness is not his. We've told about this many times, and we've told how to do this, and he will reach understanding that it's a program which dominates and substitutes. It creates an illusion of life. That's how it functions. But having studied and knowing all this, he will begin to understand that if such thought has come, this means something awaits him around that turn. If this thing has been palmed off, that thing will take. After all, it always throws signs in, and it's preparing you. If you turn there, a brick will fall on your head. If you turn there, something better will happen. And a person already starts choosing consciously whether to go there or not, or to just sit. It cannot be otherwise. Only when we surrender, we lose. While we surrender only when we lose the power of our attention, we surrender only when we are weak, right? Meaning when the animal is strong while we are weak. And it's easier for us to surrender, to give everything up, than to defend our position. It's easier to die. You see, the whole trouble is that the consciousness deceives people. It seems to them that the death is salvation, whereas death is precisely the beginning of torments. That's the point. If people knew, like I say, if they could experience the state of subpersonality for at least an instant, they would become saints very fast, and all of them, beginning with inveterate atheists, as Baraka once said. Even priests, clergymen would become saints. This is true.
Meaning, it is that moment when basically fear and understanding of what will be there beyond the verge, when you'll become a sub-personality, it basically stimulates and motivates a person to move spiritually. But can a very strong feeling of the spiritual world become an impetus in order to...
Consciousness cannot, no. Why? Because consciousness will substitute, distort everything and say that this didn't happen. Consciousness will say and doubt that you have felt this at all. After all, in fact, so many times people encounter the spiritual power which, well, let's say, for any alive, one can give such a, well, like additional forces. After all, it's additional love, joy. Well, how can, well, it's impossible to encounter this power and not to notice it, whereas the majority doesn't notice at all. Or on the contrary, consciousness begins to attack negatively and actively, right? Why? Just in order to suppress a personality that can even potentially feel it, and it imposes negativity, so that the personality wouldn't even move. That's also the point. But even if, possessing no experience, a person has got a search, yes, it may be some goal to be aimed in the future, but consciousness will surely cast doubt on this. Only this inner feeling, the feeling of craving for home, and aspiration for this, for love, and understanding that you are not just an animal. It is precisely this major impetus which forces a person to strive for spiritual development and gaining life. While a one-time search, well, for potentially alive ones it is helpful. But for those whose consciousness is too strong, this understanding will quickly get erased. Unfortunately, that's how the system works. Although we can verify experimentally.
Let's do
Well,
it.
what do you mean, let's do it? People won't understand.
But there are those who will feel, and those for whom it's indeed important and necessary, those people who will respond. And for them it will be a great help. And just like you said, one person can just raise and inspire millions of people.
It says we are sharing what's ours, just so they'll understand. Well, and for those who, on the contrary, get activated by consciousness, well, it's their choice. To choose the bad or to force consciousness to bring in a good perception, after all. For some reason, everyone thinks that they need to close their eyes, just like Tatiana, right?
Tatiana is simply hiding the tears of joy.
That they need to put the hands together to whisper something or anything else. But actually, guys, it doesn't matter what your body is doing. Spiritual love does not depend on the material body. And personality can behave exactly as we've already said. Absolutely freely and independently of what consciousness is doing according to its orders at the moment. And these spiritual outbursts, let's say, of spiritual love which a digital camera can indeed transmit, they don't come from the physical body. But when such a big, let's say, how to express it? When there is too much heat emanating from the sun, yes, in the material sense, it can be felt even at the physical level. Well, basically, it's indeed felt. Then even consciousness hesitates a bit. Well, how long will it last for people? You see, I'll put it simpler. One can, of course, feed the hungry, but he will quench his thirst only for a moment. It's better to give him an opportunity not to be hungry, not to experience hunger, but to be full all the time. Well, that's right. But in this case, a person himself should strive not only to quench his thirst or hunger, but to be himself a source of food and moisture, let's say, for those who are experiencing this thirst. This is the right approach to spiritual development and to strive. But it's only for those who truly take the path of service. While for those people who want to at least come into contact with the spiritual world, to at least free themselves a little, they should simply choose happiness, choose love and live by it. By love and happiness.
This help
It's simple.
is invaluable. It's for those who...
It's valuable for potentially alive ones.
Yes, it's very helpful.
It's serious.
And those people who are feeling this impulse now, after all, they are truly happy. They can truly understand what life is.
And you know what's joyful? It's really joyful that there are a lot of such people. Thank you, guys. We're always with you when you don't reject us. All the best.